Next item, approval of the minutes from April 16th. Any changes to the minutes?
Approved as printed.
Second that motion.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we got a few special recognitions tonight. First, Department of Labor Gold Awards, Ms. Robin.
Thank you. The Water and Sewer Authority attended the North Carolina Department Labor Luncheon in April. We received 4 gold awards from the North Carolina Department of Labor in recognition of our outstanding safety and health efforts at the following facilities, and of course, it's all of our facilities this year. And to qualify for this award, you have to have no fatalities during the calendar year at the site or the location which the award was given. And you have to maintain an incident rate for at least 50% below the statewide average. The Water and Sewer Authority had no lost times in 2024. We did not have any transferred hours due to light duty, et cetera, in 2024. So we were pleased to receive these awards, and the one that has received the award for its 17th year, actually I said 17th year, actually it's the 16th year, I'm sorry, is the Muddy Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. So in saying that, I appreciate all your support in our safety efforts at the Water and Sewer Authority. As I've always said in front of you for 20 years, our greatest asset are our employees. We want them safe as they come to work, as they go home. Thank you.
Robin, do you run our safety program at WSACC?
I am over the safety program. I don't run it, but I am the ultimate responsibility of it.
Congratulations. I just want to know who to thank. That's quite the accomplishment in a organization such as this, where there's a lot of little things that can happen, right? Little pinch points. You turn an ankle out on a site. I mean, these are just things that are very hard to stop, and it's really a cultural thing. It's a lot harder than I think most people would expect. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Our folks step up, and they are very safety conscious, and there's 59 of us, and we're very fortunate to have the safety programs in place that we have.
Good job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Jeff, picture please.
Sure. You pick the spot.
Stand right here, be good.
It's a little tight down there.
When we get into this one, you can just leave them there.
All right, next item, award from Design Build Institute of America, Chad.
Right. We received 2 pretty big recognitions for the Phase 3 expansion of the Rocky River Wastewater Treatment Plant this last month at the Southeast Regional Summit and Awards Banquet for the Design Build Institute of America. It's a much bigger organization than probably a lot would imagine. There was 300-400 people at the conference. Their water, wastewater, heavy civil, transportation, commercial, so they get into a lot of things. But the primary function of the Design Build Institute of America is to promote and facilitate and help increase the usage and the successfulness of alternative delivery methods. So it was a big accomplishment to be recognized for the 2 awards we did. The first award I will point out actually has a little funny story to it. We received 2nd place in the $10 to $100 million project for water and wastewater projects. It's my understanding that we were going to win 1st place in the $100+ million category. When some final paperwork was turned in and the $9 million savings that we saw on the project dropped us below $100 million. And it's my understanding another project had kind of already been made aware it was going to win the 10 to 100. We fell to 2nd place on that. When I made my my little speech for the 2nd award we've got, I pointed out on behalf of the board and of our staff that we would take the $9 million and the 2nd place trophy versus the 1st place trophy. So I felt comfortable in saying that on the board's behalf.
Take some of that $9 million, make yourself a trophy.
There you go. We got one right over there. We're good. The second award was, I think it's the biggest award of the night, that they give out. It's given out across all categories, all sizes of projects, and that was Owner of the Year to WSAC. That only comes from meeting some pretty strenuous metrics on the performance of a project and some very complimentary recommendations on behalf of the builder and the engineer that was a part of that project. It's been said before by staff, it's been said before by our engineers and our contractors, but the flexibility and the quick decision-making that this board did during the time period of this project, of getting this project moving forward, sometimes doing GMPs in back-to-back months, of doing that, really helped facilitate this project being completed the way it was, the savings that we ultimately saw and being done on schedule. And so I just can't say enough from the engineer that was responsible for that of how much that was appreciated and how important that was towards the project. So we do have those two trophies. And before we get them in the pictures, Derek Beach with Crowder Construction's here, and he wanted to say just a couple things.
Yeah, appreciate that. You know, Crowder's been the design builder on this project in partnership with Joel and his team at Brown and Caldwell. And I've done a lot of design build work over the years. And it is a great delivery method, but it's a flawless delivery method. It takes all of the parties that are involved working really hard and working together on it. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you guys and y'all staff. And we do appreciate you guys, and it was a well-deserved award. Thank you guys.
Thank you. So we've got the two awards here. My plan, we're going to figure out a place. I think they mean more being displayed at the Rocky River plant than they do up here in this building. So we've kept them up here till tonight, but then we're going to be setting up a place in the entryway down there at the Rocky River plant to put that, to display those awards after tonight.
So do it like the Stanley Cup and let Thomas take it home.
You can't drink out of them. I know that. So I guess we'll grab these.
I'm gonna wait the night. Expected.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I think that deserves a congratulations.
All right, moving on to reports. Miss Wendy, quarterly financial reports.
I don't have anything to add. I'm just be glad to answer any at this time.
Any questions for Wendy?
Do you prepared a funds availability spreadsheet that was sent to the board?
Yes.
And on it was I think it was Kannapolis primary water loop project and 1.47 million. And we were talking a little before the board meeting about that as well. I mean, what is that project? What's the status?
As far as last time I looked, I told you before that I have not looked into it recently, but we weren't sure exactly what that project was for in Kannapolis. Do you know, Mayor?
I tried to add on to it, but the one I was talking about was a sewer project, not a water project. And that's the one that I know Senator Newton worked with a developer in order to get a larger pump station built for that project that is along Kannapolis Park, Dale Earnhardt Boulevard. But that is not classified as water, so I'm not certain what that number is.
And no one, a developer has not contacted us to try to, I guess, receive these funds.
So we'll do some investigation into that and we will get an answer out to the board just as quickly as can of what we can learn over the next week or so. We'll get some information out on that.
My only thought is, if we don't claim it, then eventually DEQ will reroute the funds elsewhere. So maybe if we don't have a known purpose, maybe we find a purpose.
Right.
And seek some language in a tech corrects bill to reroute it to something that we do want to do as a board.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Any other questions? All right, now on to the big one, facilities plan. Thomas, you gonna kick this one off?
Sure, I will. So this is a couple of presentations tonight, following up on an introduction of different alternatives that we did at the last board meeting. George Anipsitakis from Brown and Caldwell. Did I get that right, George? Okay. He is here tonight to describe the work they've done, the alternatives for these two service areas. There is one presentation for Muddy Creek. We've got that one up first, and then the Rocky River service area afterwards. There are costs in the Muddy Creek, in a little preview, there are costs in the Muddy Creek document, but then they are all summarized at the end of the Rocky River document. So certainly any questions you have as George goes along, that would be fine, but just wanted to point that out that those are summarized there kind of all together for discussion at the end.
Hello, everybody. I'm sure you all now know from previous presentations what we're gonna talk about, so we'll start with Muddy Creek. Muddy Creek is permitted for 0.3 million gallons per day right now, or 300,000 gallons per day right now, so we wanna see what makes sense, what's the next expansion that makes sense. So this is the presentation for that. A little agenda. I know you all have talked about projections before. We'll hit on those a little bit, maybe quickly. We talk about the different alternatives that we have investigated, and then we'll compare them, non-cost factors, and then we'll go into costs, O&M costs, capital costs, and then we'll do a net present value analysis in the end, and we'll close with the next steps. So, there's a little busy slide. Maybe forget the text. Let's focus a little bit on the right side, and maybe you have seen a version of this graph, but this shows the projected flows in the service area of Muddy Creek. Down here, maybe we want to focus on the green squares and the green line. The green squares are your annual average daily flow, and the squares are historical flows. And then the green line, the solid line, kind of continue on from the little squares. That's your projected annual average daily flow. The black lines, kind of stepwise line, that's the permitted capacity of the Muddy Creek. Right now is at 0.3 or over there on the y-axis, right? And then we looked at expanding the plant to 0.6, so doubling its capacity, 600,000 gallons per day or 0.6 million gallons, or going to 1 million gallon per day. We did look at the 450,000 million gallon per day, but it became apparent from this graph and these projections that this will be a too short-lived expansion. You will need to expand shortly thereafter, after you've constructed a 450,000 gallon per day plant. So we're focusing on the 600,000 alternative or the 1 million gallon alternative. But what this graph also says that at your existing capacity right now of 300,000 gallons per day, there are instances in wetter months that you will get close to not meeting your permit flow wise, not parameter or water quality wise. What it also says is that by 2028 or so, these are the dotted lines below the solid black line. The dotted lines are what is required by DEQ, that once you hit 80% of your permitted capacity, you need to be planning for the next step or the next expansion. And once you hit 90% of your permitted capacity, you need to be ready to construct something. So this facilities plan and this study addresses this 80% threshold, and we are within that 80% threshold right now. So something needs to be done for Muddy Creek. Maybe you all agree on that. At 600,000 gallon per day expansion, based on the graph there, it will take you all the way out to 20. Again, staying with the dotted line and the green line where the two intersect, maybe it'll be good up to 2040, 41, 42. Based on the projections. And one MGD expansion, it will be good beyond the planning horizon of this study. As you can see, the one MGD line goes all the way out, and the green line doesn't intercept it in this graph. Any questions on this?
I would like to add a point of clarification to make sure everybody understands. So you can have a plant that the state says you do not have to expand yet because of capacity, but yet you can get a notice of violation for exceeding your capacity on a month, on a high flow month. Okay. So it's they kind of contradict each other and work against each other. And so we've actually had, as you can see through the blue dots, 3 months in the last couple of years, we've been very close to exceeding the 300,000 gallon. So it's a small plant, peak rainfall affects it more significantly. And we definitely don't want to end up in a situation where we're having a month or two where we're 350,000 gallon a day of flow in a 300,000 gallon a day plant. So that's kind of why George is saying here, you can't wait to the 80 and 90 necessarily in this small plant like this. The time is now to move on that.
That's right. Also, I didn't want to confuse you. We have the apples, which is the annual average daily flow, and then we have the oranges, which is the max month flow. And the max month flow is what is in the permit. And that's what we are getting close to violating sometimes. But the two are connected by what we call a peaking factor. There is always a ratio of the max month over annual average. And that's what you see there with a shaded kind of area. There is uncertainty in the max month peaking factor, so there is a bracket, right? We're trying to bracket all that, and the average max month that we predict is kind of the line, the blue line that falls within that shaded area. So you could follow that max month line and see where that intercepts the solid stepwise black line and paint a different story. Actually, if you follow that, it tells you that you need to expand sooner. But there is uncertainty in the max month factor, and so we don't want to put all our eggs in that.
There's also been an external factor at play for the last 5 or 6 years, which is rather unique to the Muddy Creek Basin, and that is the town is operated off of one water tank, one 500,000 gallon water tank. And for the last 5 to 6 years, we've been out of water storage. And what that means from a practical standpoint is that for the last 5 or 6 years, we've not been allowed to do any water line extensions. It's hard to grow without doing any water line extensions. And we've also had to turn away infill development on existing water lines that were large water users. And so that has resulted in dozens of projects that would have otherwise been approved over the last 5 or 6 years, many of them by right, and that would be in the ground right now, not being able to move forward. And that's been on the water side. Had we not been constrained by the water tank issue, we would be out of capacity today, based on what we've seen in those projects that have come through. Now, so we've not experienced what you've experienced, which is running out of sewer capacity, because we've been constrained on the water side. And that external factor is about to go away. So right now, there's a new 1 million gallon water tank going in. The stem is going up this week. The bowl will be up soon. So we will no longer be constrained from a water storage standpoint. Our storage is going to triple. And we do have pent up demand. We do have a lot of those projects that are calling in about every quarter, asking what the status is on the new water tank, because they know that is what's keeping them from moving forward. And again, many of these projects are by right. And so based on conversations with the town engineer yesterday, he does think it's a possibility that that 0.3 million gallon will be gone as soon as 2027, not 2030. And that the 0.6 could be gone as early as 2032, not 2042. Because once the water situation has dampened that historical curve. That's just been the reality of our situation, and that's been unique to us. And I just wanted everyone to understand what the staff has experienced for the last 5 or 6 years, because we have literally fielded calls. A lot of times people won't go away with a phone call. They want to come in and meet, and they want to talk about it. And they want to ask the numbers on the tank. You know, they want to make sure that they're not getting told a story. And we've just had to manage that for the last 5 or 6 years. Even in our TRC meetings, it's been a very difficult topic. But with the new water tank going in, and the stem is going up this week, I think that the remaining capacity on the plant is going to go quickly. And our town engineer believes it'll go quickly as well.
Was all that information shared with George so that he and his study that is being produced up here would have not known what we're talking about?
I think the status of that tank was still up in the air when we were doing that master planning. So the status of that water tank was still up in the air. So that wasn't a certainty like it is today. But today that water tank going in is a certainty.
Well, is there more lines that are required in addition to the storage capacity you're talking about? So that you would have to have additional main lines, service lines, whatever it happens to be, in order to serve that group
No.
of customers you're talking about?
No.
These people are already on lines that have a sufficient capacity.
Yes.
So as soon as you get that tank in line, it's just magic. It's
Yeah.
ready to go.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Midland is a little unique. We've got a significant water presence, and not a so significant sewer presence. And as Doug said, water, we've been talking about the elevated storage. Really, it's the emergency storage calculation with the school down there, and you lose so much capacity, operating capacity in that tank because of the fire flow at the school. And Concord has been talking with Midland for a while, and finally, they've been able to get that tank moving. And I do agree with Doug. It's a unique animal down there in that there is really not a lot of looking back at trends and history to understand. I do think also if there is pent up demand, which I believe based on the last 4 or 5 years, there likely is. I think similar to the wet weather flows, the numbers are a lot more susceptible to big swings because they're so small already. But I do think, I mean, we've got some momentum, I think, on this first expansion. And I think what we need to be careful of is that this chart does not declare when we go to 1 million, right? It is a planning document that says, Harry, this is where we think it likely is going to be needed. I mean, to your point, Doug, if that curve starts to dramatically change, this board's going to have a conversation just like we would, at our other facilities. So I think just not getting too locked into future decisions and just knowing and understanding that the board will have to address those. And I think there's a lot of good tools as part of the master plan that staff knows a lot more often, or updated a lot more often, what the current flows and statuses are that will let us monitor a lot better, maybe than we had in the past. But it is unique. And I don't want to lose sight of that second expansion being able to be driven by data, just like our other expansion, exercises are doing as well.
So I guess I'm saying that's a pretty dramatic change that you're describing based on comparison to the data that we have in front of us.
Well, imagine if Kannapolis would not have been allowed to extend any water lines or have any significant infill development on existing water lines for the last 5 to 6 years. Imagine how differently your city would look.
I understand.
Because a lot of your most important projects occurred for the last 5 to 6 years. Now, we've had to accept that reality, that we were not able to do what we wanted to do in the last 5 or 6 years. But now that that water tank is going up, it's not a constraint anymore. So we're excited about that, and that's gonna be good for our area. So we're hoping to be able to build out our town and to have a nice town that people are excited to be a part of and that people are excited to visit and that is gonna be positive.
You think you see a nearer term jump? So steepening of that line. So the green almost in your mind probably looks more like the blue from Go because of the pent up.
Yeah.
demand. Now, I imagine that would, you know, temper or modulate over time to what the region is seeing, but it's a good, I mean, it's a good point. I think that's the only real thing we're looking at is kind of that cost benefit of the second expansion based on what I'm seeing here, right? Cause it's like, we're gonna have to do something to get to that 0.6 because 0.3 didn't make sense based on what George was saying. But then there's this cost and timing of the 1,000,000 gallon. And if that, you know, if you have a decision point to make and you're just short of it, information like this would escalate it. And in my opinion, but I think you'd have to look at that in much more detail to understand what that means. If it's a nominal cost, that makes a big difference too. Like there's a lot of scale savings on something like this.
Tops.
Yeah, but sometimes, yeah.
So, and we'll see some of that as he moves through this press.
So the alternatives that will be presented to you today will be a group of alternatives if you want to expand to 600,000 gallons per day, and then a group of alternatives to expand all the way to 1,000,000 gallons per day right away without going to 600,000. So, so expansion alternatives group number 1, let's call it like that, right? And we're gonna talk about what it will take to expand to 0.6 million gallons or 600,000, right? There are 3 alternatives, A, 1A, B, and C, 1B, 1C. Over here on the right, this is kind of the existing treatment plant with faded the existing infrastructure, and with bold is what is proposed. So this alternative follows kind of how treatment is being provided at the plant right now. We'll call it the conventional activated sludge process, which is very similar to what the Rocky River will eventually have as we are converted from high purity to also ambient air and conventional activated sludge. Water comes in. Over here, water comes in from the right side, kind of it will flow this way and then down to the river, right? So from the right side, we have an influent pump station that we're gonna kind of double its capacity. We're doubling the capacity of the existing plant, right? From 0.3, we're going to 0.6. So in the influent pump station side, kind of doubling what you have there with a second sister pump station, then flowing over a little bit there to the middle. We have the EQ tank, equalization tank with screens. We're adding a new screen, and then we're adding a new equalization tank. So we'll have 2 tanks. These are the 2 circles there that you see on the right. The existing treatment plant or the biological process is right here in the center that you see those rectangles. We're gonna convert those to sludge holding tanks. Operations there and your staff has has brought to our attention that the storage, the sludge storage is not sufficient there. You store the sludge and then you truck it to Rocky River. That tracking has to be too frequent to keep up with operations, so we need more volume, more storage. So we're gonna convert all that to sludge storage, and over there to the left, that you see the long rectangle going from the top to the bottom of the page, we're gonna build a new biological process, or the aeration tanks as we call them. And the water will flow from top of the page to the bottom of the page, and we will have two trains, two separate bioreactors as we call them, right? These bioreactors will flow into those circular tanks that are the existing secondary clarifiers down there. These have sufficient capacity for the expansion to 600,000 gallons per day. And from there, we're gonna go to filtration over here and ultraviolet light disinfection and down to the river, the creek. That's in a nutshell, this alternative. I will go to the next alternative. The next alternative is a very typical, similar to the first alternative, the conventional activated sludge. Everything is gonna be exactly the same as before, and only the shape of the aeration basin or the bioreactors changes, right? Now you see kind of like what we call it, a racetrack shape reactor or a carousel. So that we call it the oxidation ditch. An oxidation ditch biological process is very popular for this size of a treatment plant. It has no moving parts. It just has a couple of big brushes or mixers. There are no blowers, there are no diffusers, and that is it. That's the moving part. The mixer, the impeller is in the water, the motor is above the water. Usually the only thing that you got to maintain is the gearbox and the motor above, above the deck. It's kind of a bulletproof technology. You can leave it unattended. It's very popular, and that's why we are proposing it here. But it's very similar to the 1A alternative, right? Then the next alternative is what we call the aerobic granular sludge. Again, things upstream and downstream of the bioreactors look similar, with the equalization tanks, the influent pump station. But over here in the middle now, again, similar to the other alternatives, we're gonna do sludge storage or sludge buffer tanks, they call. But go over here to the left and see how smaller now the bioreactors are compared to the previous alternatives. So this is a newer technology. It has taken off in Europe and other places of the world. Here in the United States, maybe there are 5 or 6 that are constructed, maybe 20 under design. It is a novel technology because it hasn't, taken over in the United States, but at the same time is mature enough to come here myself and tell you, hey, it's gonna work. And the type of bacteria that we're gonna grow, they are more granular. That's why we call it aerobic granular sludge. So being granular, they kind of do more in a much smaller volume. And that's the benefit of this technology. Facilities that are out of space, out of real estate, go with this technology. Here, you're not out of space necessarily. We're gonna do a comparison of these technologies in a little bit, so we'll get into that. The other thing that I failed to tell you is that this granular sludge, the 1C and the 1A, just because of the sizing and the symmetry, they will be good enough for 660,000 gallons per day, not just 600,000 gallons per day, 660,000 gallons per day, or 0.66 MGD. So if we go with one of these alternatives, we're gonna go and ask for a permit for 0.66 MGD. So that gives you another 60,000 gallons per day of capacity. This concludes the alternatives for 600,000 gallons per day. So we're gonna go now to 1 million gallons per day, right? Same alternatives, same technologies, same concepts, but things are bigger, right? Because we gotta treat more flow. But the principle is the same. Now over here to the right, I mean, the 2A, the conventional activated sludge, similar to the 1A. Over here on the right, the influent pump station, now the existing one you have is too small and we cannot just build a sister one. We gotta go build a brand new one, big one. But the concept with the equalization tanks, again, 2 tanks, the second new tank that we gotta build is gonna be bigger than the first alternative. The sludge holding with the existing tanks still in the middle. And over here now, you remember the bioreactors from 1A, we had 2 trains, 2 bioreactors. Now we have 3 bioreactors, right? 0.66 MGD of capacity plus 0.33, that gives you 1 million gallons per day of capacity. Down here at the bottom, we will need another clarifier. So the 2 clarifiers that are already constructed are not enough for the 1 MGD, but they are in the center, tertiary filtration, the filters and the ultraviolet light disinfection that you do right now. This will be new facilities there for this alternative. In this case, it's gonna be 1 million gallon per day plant, right? Remember the racetrack reactor, same as the one I presented before. Now we do 2 reactors, right? We do 2 reactors, symmetrical. You can take one offline for maintenance if you need to, but it's not very typical. But now, because we built a 0.6, that for symmetry, again, we have 2 bioreactors. The first one gives you 0.6 MGD worth of capacity. When I add another one, it'll take you to 1.2 million gallons per day. In wastewater treatment, we keep things symmetrical because we want to have the same performance through bioreactors. So I wouldn't come here and tell you, hey, let's build a 0.6 carousel. And then I'm going to give you a mini carousel that only does 0.4 for 2 units, right? So if we want to do 0.6. So this alternative is going to be a 1.2 MGD. And then similar with the newer technology, the granular sludge, we do more in smaller volume. We have 3 bioreactors there compared to the previous alternative that had 2. And these are the 6 alternatives that we looked at. 3 alternatives for the 600,000 gallons per day expansion and 3 alternatives for the 1 MGD. I will keep going. You can stop me anytime you want. These are advantages and disadvantages between those, right? Technologies, whether flow is 600,000 or 1 MGD, it doesn't really matter now. We're talking about the pros and cons. So the A alternatives, the 1A and 2A, is kind of the status quo, is similar to what you're used to, your staff is used to. It does some nitrogen removal, and nitrogen and phosphorus removal is important for you, not necessarily right now, or it may be, but for the future. We want new treatment plants and expanded plants to be able to do some of that. The oxidation ditch below, it does some nitrogen removal. It's simpler than what you are operating right now. It has, it's not as efficient as the 1A and 2A. It takes a larger footprint, and maybe the sludge doesn't settle very well. And then the last alternative, the newer technology, it has more advantages in terms of performance compared to the other ones. It has a smaller footprint. It doesn't need a lot of infrastructure. It does perform better for nitrogen and phosphorus removal, but in the drawbacks, it's a newer technology, and maybe we don't want to take a risk and be, installation number 6 or number 7 or number 8 in the United States. Continuing on the comparison, we looked at some other non-cost factors before we get to the cost factors, like the performance, reliability, permitting, uncertainty, how expandable these plants are, any risks, how simple it is to operate them, integration is, how we can, leverage existing infrastructure and build on that. And then automation is, and we scored them. Okay, we gave them simple scores, poor, excellent, green, average, and then poor, 1, 2, 3. Okay, scores 1, 2, 3. And we tally them up, and the total now at the bottom, the high score is good, the lower score is not so good. But the point I want to make here, the oxidation ditch seems to be having the highest score, but all three of them are kind of in the general area. They are comparable in terms of non-cost factors criteria. Let's go to the costs. So here are the costs. There are 3 rows of costs. Let me explain what these are. The top is kind of an initial estimate that we did, and doesn't include engineering. So, your staff when saw that those costs, question some of them. So we use the second methodology almost completely independent from the first methodology, and we created the cost of line number 2, right? Row number 2, like a cost estimating group took the preliminary drawings we had and did detailed takeoffs and a detailed 50-page estimate. You can see between the two that in the lower flow, the ones, right, 1A, B, and C, the two methodologies are very close in terms of construction costs. And the larger flows over there to the 1 MGD, the 2A, 2B, 2C, the second method has the costs in the 35 to 39 or $40 million, whereas the first methodology takes you from 43 to 50 range. But you can see the range of the different projects. Now, if we add engineering during design, permitting, and construction, we adopt the second row, right? The second row, the more detailed methodology, and we add the engineering to the second row, we come with a third row. So these are the total costs that you're looking right now to construct a 600,000 expansion or an expansion to 1 MGD. Now these costs include escalation, include contingency. So over there, the tiny table to the top right, it has like a little construction schedule, and we are showing that we anticipate to break ground with construction about October of 2026. And the smaller project, the 600,000, will be complete in 2 years by 2028. The larger project, the 1 MGD, will be completed in 3 years by 2029. And then figuring out the midpoint of construction, that gives you an escalation percentage that is factored into these costs. These costs are escalated to future values to the midpoint of construction per the schedule up there. We can come back to this if you want, but real quick. Yes, sir.
George, help me with the cost a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Alternative 1 in either of the 3 choices is to go from 300 to 600.
Sir.
And then alternative 2 is to go all the way to 1 million, or is it that just to add the extra 400,000?
All the way to 1 million. As if like take the 2A, B, and C as if the ones don't exist. Yes.
That's still my question, which is, are they complementary? What's the cost to go? Well, certainly if you go with, like you mentioned, the activated sludge, you would have to continue to, the CAS column if you were to do it in steps. Yes. So you're kind of committing in that, but the cost difference isn't necessarily what we see on the board here if you do it in two stages.
Correct.
And the difference in the scoring between one A and one B was 1 point difference? I
Yes.
mean, do you have a preference between one A and one B?
1A. That's the aeration basin that's being shown there and being built. It's essentially what was built at Rocky River. It's the technology we know. So it's diffusers, it's blowers, we wouldn't have one type of plant operating at Muddy Creek on a oxidation ditch and a blower plant at Rocky River. I have confidence in either technology. It would just be the fact of that our maintenance staff, our operators would just be used to one type of a plant operation. Plus these numbers, the 18.8 million gets you to 660,000 gallons per day, where the 20 million only gets you to 600,000 gallons a day. So there is some, you get 60,000 more gallons out of 1A as well. So the cost is essentially the same when you look at it on a gallon per gallon
So
basis.
that's what I was trying to get
Yeah.
to in my head.
And we're gonna
The
look at,
cost per gallon, somewhere I'm missing that. Cost per gallon goes up dramatically. When we go up to 1 million, this transition, is that because the escalation factor is higher in that situation where you think the cost of money is more for that third year to build it?
it's the pump station. It's having to go to a more robust pump station, a headworks, grit removal, a larger EQ tank, but really it's that influent pump station
Oh,
of having to go to just a much more robust
okay.
pump station. Because what you're doing, if you go from 300 to 600, you're building basically another 300,000 gallon a day pump station next to your 300,000 gallon pump station. When you go to 1 million, you have to basically ditch the 300 that's there and build a new 1 MGD pump station. Now, it would have to be something we would have to consider and give directions to our engineer. If we go from 300, we do another 300, and then we go to 1 million, well, now we're gonna scrap 600,000 gallons a day worth of pump station. Do you go ahead and do the bigger pump station from the beginning? And that's where we would have to get further in the weeds of what just makes good economical sense of not trying to strand as little cost as you can into the future. So we would have to look at all of that. And when you're doing what George is doing here, you try to get that far down into making assumptions. You never get stopped. You have to pick a point of kind of analyzing too, and then we can make decisions from there.
And am I to assume that the difference or the start date is based upon essentially a year worth of permitting and all of those soft functions that are required before you start construction? Is that why we can't start until October 1st?
Of
Of
next year, yeah.
Yeah, next year.
Because we haven't completely designed it yet either, like we have to.
Design and permitting.
Design and permit. Permit will be easy because you have a permit for 1 MGD, so that will be a smooth sale, kind of. But we have to design, we have to prepare, detailed documents. To
Okay.
construct it. Now, the dollar per gallon too, if you do the math, 40 divided 0.7 by 0.7, 40 million gallons divided by 0.7 of extra capacity we're getting from 0.3 to 1. That's $57 a gallon. If you divide 18 or 19 by 0.3, which 0.3 plus 0.3 takes you to 0.6, right? 19 divided by 0.3, I was doing that here, is about 57. What did I say? 57 before, 60. No, I'm sorry, $60 per gallon for the smaller, 57 for the larger. So if you do the math, it's still the dollar per gallon. The larger scale is a smaller value.
Plus you don't have sunk costs that you're gonna have to throw away in order to go to 1 million.
Is there a way to do the exercise where, using Doug's numbers earlier, understanding the more realistic numbers once the water releases and all of that comes in, we hit 0.6 million gallons per day by 2032. And now we have to move into the next phase of going to 1 million. Is there an exercise that says, hey, if we bite the apple now, or in this next time frame, and you go to the 1 million, that's going to buy you an extra number of years before you're forced to actually get into it
it would all come down to assumptions. You know,
Right.
it would all come down to assumptions and projections.
Yeah.
Your other challenge is if you build a 1 MGD plant, we're flowing 180,000 gallons a day right now. If you're a couple of years from now and you're flowing 250,000 gallons a day in a 1 MGD plant, you have a lot of challenges from an operational
Almost a
standpoint.
lot of unused
Yeah, because you can't, it's
infrastructure as well.
very, very difficult to operate a plant that is at that low of its capacity.
Yeah.
You start getting under 40%.
Efficiency rating
Yes.
drops.
So, I think it's wise for us to consider, if we go to 600 or 660, to consider decisions that will streamline or make going on to 1 million more efficient. But I think going directly to 1 does create some challenges of its own.
Yeah.
In the short term, depending on how things play out, you know,
Yeah,
I mean, we hate to think of a complete shutdown like we saw in 2008, where
Yeah.
nothing gets built for a number of years and stuff like that. But, we certainly don't want that or hope that, but
it's more than just dollars and cents. I mean, today's dollar is gonna be cheaper than tomorrow's dollar, theoretically.
well, yeah, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Definitely. But also I think too, to the point of what you said, we have to pick a date to put on here for a start date. Obviously, if we could get started in August of 26, we would get started in August or June, but we don't want to say we're going to start in March of next year and it be October. We would much rather present a date to you now that we can meet or beat than put out a date that's unreasonable.
So just for my understanding, 1B scores a point higher than 1A, but 1A is preferred by the staff for practical reasons.
And
You
1A
get 60,000 more gallons per day, and
It's,
you like the way it's done, but.
and it's common technology with Rocky River.
Okay.
cheaper. There's a value there. Do they all run the same sort of build? I mean, obviously the number chart tells me that they all run the same sort of build timeline. I mean, one technology, obviously the newer technology might take a little bit longer. But are they all pretty fairly?
Fairly the same time.
Please proceed.
Yes, sir, thank you. So, you can see the comparison of the capital costs here, and again, 1A appears to be the more economical of the 3. So the only thing that I have to add here is that we looked also, net present worth value. We factored in operating and maintenance costs, right, into those capital costs. So the bottom line is that still the 1A or the A's have the lowest net present value of all the alternative, not only capital. And that concludes this presentation. Again, in the premises of the project, the next steps will be for you all to pick an alternative, and we are tasked to take it to a little bit more detailed design. 15% design may not sound too much, but it is good, little better than what we have now, and it will allow us to do a little better cost estimate and tighten some of the assumptions that we have. And after that, I believe we'll be ready to advertise the project for.
Let me add a couple more ideas or concepts here. Based on what Chad just said, you don't want to operate a plant at 20% of capacity because that creates all kinds of issues. And I think all of us who have done that understand those issues. Even if I accept Doug's numbers, that there's going to be a rapid buildup and we may get to 600, Josh, as we talked about earlier, than those numbers originally showed. That's still a long ways from a million process. All of us in the county have outstanding demand. We all have a list of people who could come to us. For example, one of the questions that I have asked frequently in this discussion has been, Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant is probably doing the same kind of turnaway that Doug was doing, but for the opposite reason. He didn't have sewer capacity. Doug didn't have water capacity. So we had to turn away opportunities. Is part of this capacity that we're talking about, whether we go to 600,000 or a million, is part of that capacity available for someone else other than just the basin that the creek is located in? Look up here. If you look at Reedy Creek, McKee Creek, all of that area there, if some of that water was pulled off so that it could be directed to Muddy Creek, that would create capacity in Rocky River. That capacity in Rocky River could be shared with Mount Pleasant. So that not just one community is benefiting from the process by going to 1 million gallons, and maybe that's what we need to do as we go along. But multiple communities are committed or improving as a result of that. So I would say that is a serious question that we should all ask ourselves.
Well, there's one big problem with that. There's no pipe to get there unless we're gonna put it in the back of tanker trucks.
I know that, but you and I both know that we could turn a couple of those pump stations around, add a pipe, a force station, get that sewer from that creek down to, and maybe 200 or 300 or 400,000 gallons of capacity could be picked up out of Rocky River and directed to that in the interim while we're waiting for doing all of that stuff. And as a result of that, then we create some, we want to call it temporary opportunity for some short period of time until you really do get to 1 million gallons of demand in your region, so that maybe all of that needs to be done. And we just take those same 2 pump stations that I'm talking about redirecting, put them back to the same connection they were in, and let them pump to Rocky River.
There is no pipe there. There's no easements that have been secured for any of that. You're talking 6 to 8 miles worth of pipe. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars just to.
We're talking about millions of dollars already.
Just to do that. I think the money spent acquiring easements and building that type of flow switch would be better spent just expanding the Rocky River plant itself, or putting additional plant up in the Concord area like we talked about. I think that is I think that's gonna be a more cost effective. There's gonna be a better direct benefit for everyone. Because there's nothing that's immediate or temporary about a flow switch. I mean, you don't have the easements, the pipe's not there. I mean, it's not something you can just flip a switch and in 6 months or a year it's working.
But we're talking about 2029. Before this is available, if we go to 1 million gallons, we're talking about 2029. So nothing is being flipped a switch to do that. I'm talking about a regional plan that includes all of the communities in Cabarrus County, talking about how we take an asset that is a county asset and allocate it so that not just Midland, but others can enjoy some capacity out of that asset that we have.
I
That's
mean,
all I'm asking about.
there's been a lot and I know my knowledge is limited. Let me ask 2-part question here. Am I correct in saying that the WSACC service area is larger than the Cabarrus County boundary? Right? We take water from Charlotte Water.
We have a contract customer that's outside of Mecklenburg
Is
County.
there any other outside the county limits recipients of WSACC services?
There's a little bit of flow that comes out of Landis area in there.
Just a tiny.
I mean, it's a very small amount, but.
Okay. So on paper, the WSACC service area is more than just Cabarrus County. Is that a true statement?
Just slightly more.
Slightly more, but on paper, it is. We provide a benefit to everybody else, or not to everybody, but to certain customers outside of the county limits. It is a county asset. I would say this, Mayor, I agree with Doug that the value that you would create, or excuse me, the cost that you would incur to add infrastructure to pipe. And I know I brought it up last month or maybe a couple months ago. And I put it out there as a talking point. There's There's a huge, it's probably not the most cost-effective way to do it. Is it doable? Yes. It's not the most cost-effective way. I'm looking at that map, and to me, it looks like 60% of the county, maybe even more, has benefited from the Rocky River increase. Is that a fair statement? 60% or more. I see that entire purple area at the bottom. That's the basin for Muddy Creek. And Muddy Creek was built when?
92,
Has it been expanded since it was built?
twice,
Okay, when was the last expansion?
2019.
2019 to the current 300. And already we're having to tap in and talk about this next level expansion, correct? I think that right there shows how hot that part of the county is. Not only do we have Corning asking to put another 40,000, roughly, right, 38 or whatever that was, of water over there that received some generally favorable dialogue when they were here. But with Doug saying what's coming in the pipeline with water once it's released, I'm of the opinion that giving Muddy Creek its time it's on the horizon. I mean, we're actually coming up to the exit off the highway where it's like, all right, we're either going to do this or we're not. We're either going to tamp down this whole area of the county. Ultimately, when that part of the county expands, the whole county benefits. It's probably got the most unused land in that part of the county. I've used the example with people because I am a builder. If you look around the entire Charlotte area, there is one last bastion of wild wilderness around the Charlotte metro area. It's the southern part of Cabarrus County. Simply because the infrastructure hasn't been there to support the building that's been the residential and commercial building that's been growing pressure. I build in that area. I'm building all septic right now because I can't build sewer. I can't connect to it. And that's not just from me. That's only my personal experience and from what I see. And I understand sitting here, I represent the entire service area and I'm privileged to do that. I think my comments are, there's a lot of agreement here, but it also seems like there's a little bit of discourse on where and how much we go. I mean, Rocky River is 34 million gallons by the time this phase 4 expansion is done. It's 34 times what the permit is for Muddy Creek right now. So, I mean, where there seems to be some unweighted.
Well, I think one thing I'll add is I don't think this conversation is unique to Midland at all. I know we've discussed some Mount Pleasant options in the past. I think the fundamental sort of question, and I think the model is changing, right? And I think what the mayor's suggesting is just taking a moment to look at WSACC assets and how we are, these are, I will say, the next chart you see like this, big plant. So looking at the overall needs of WSACC as the business, it's huge money. And I think there is some value in looking to making sure we're expanding when we need to expand and not too early, certainly not too late, because the reality of this, of all these numbers, is it's going, our existing customers today are paying this bill. The only way it happens, right? So those are huge numbers. The next set of numbers is even huger. But I'll go back to my point about not being unique to Midland is we've talked about this wetland system or some sort of system in Mount Pleasant that would sort of take care of Mount Pleasant for a significant long period of time. Well, that's a huge investment that WSACC would make in one specific municipality that now would not have sewer constraints, while even with a big Rocky River expansion, the rest of us continue to live in turning projects down. So I think the tough part here is up until now, everybody's had to sort of suffer collectively, obviously at a different scale, and that's fair to understand. But I think now that we have opportunities to build our way out of this, certain places, certain cities, certain parts of cities even could benefit or it could be detrimental to certain subsections of the system. And I think we've tried really hard to not make that happen up until now. So I do think there's some value in looking at what those opportunities are, but I also agree that you have to look at what your overall investments are and does it make sense? And be willing to accept that there are gonna be some short-term areas that benefit more than others, and then once we expand Rocky River, you know, Midland's not gonna really get any benefit out of that.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be these short-term wins and losses.
Let's talk about what the mayor's idea does practically for us. Because there's a winner and a loser in that situation. Right now, our plan is at 300,000 gallons per day. And if we expanded to 660,000 a day, and then we shift the area that he's talking about, which have been discussed in private meetings, which I've been excluded from. All right, I've been excluded from those meetings. I had to track that down on my own. But if those areas are shifted to the Muddy Creek plant, you're talking about shifting 300,000 gallons per day of flow to the Muddy Creek plant. So you're talking about taking it from 300 to 600, 300 to 660, and then you're going to shift 300,000 gallon per day flow down to the plant. That's going to leave us with nothing to allocate out. We're going to have nothing to allocate out at that point. So we're going to go from having no water to having water, to having sewer to having no sewer. And we're not going to be able to do anything down there. So we are going to, that transaction is not cost effective, not practical, and we lose while you gain. That is just a bad solution. I cannot impress enough how bad it would be to do that.
Sorry. You heard me say, Josh, a few minutes ago, if I accept Doug's numbers of the rapid growth we're talking about, I have never said, will never say, that Midland should not have capacity to grow. Never have said that. And I believe that the plan we're talking about still gives Midland capacity to grow. All I'm saying is that capacity that is developed there at Muddy Creek could be shared by others. Maybe Harrisburg needs some additional capacity because they've got a waiting list of people that they could get approved too. I know that Mount Pleasant has some big needs that they can't get done. All I'm saying is, before we decide every gallon of that capacity at Muddy Creek is designated and it will always be nobody's but Midline, let's look at the overall plan that we have for our entire county and see what we're talking about. I'm not suggesting you won't have capacity. I never have. I don't believe.
But shifting that flow and only taking the plant to 600 or 660 doesn't leave us with any capacity. There's no capacity left at that point.
It doesn't mean that we have to shift 300. Maybe we shift 100 to start with. Maybe we shift 150 or 200. And as Mount Pleasant begins to grow and we need to take more capacity out of Rocky River, maybe we're talking about only a smaller amount of that. And that's what I'm talking about. We need to make a collective decision as to where capacity is and how we allocate it. Every community in this county has a waiting list, including you, including Harrisburg. All of us have waiting lists. Why is it that Muddy Creek is only to satisfy your waiting list and nobody else's? That's the real basic question we have to ask and answer ourselves here. And so if it costs $5 million more to turn that pump station around, buy right away, put a thing in, compare 5 million more to what we're already talking about spending, it's pretty much chicken feed compared to the overall cost of what we're doing as we're moving things along the process. All I'm asking for is let's look at an asset, because if we want to talk about cost, who's going to pay that number right up there? 90% of that cost is going to get paid by two communities. It's not Midland who's going to be paying for this. It's going to be Annapolis and Concord who are paying for that increase that's right there that we're going to talk about, because it's our users who pay the bill for water that that, WSAC treats. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay for it. We get 90% of the service that's there. So we should pay that. But anything new that's there is going to be paid for primarily by Kannapolis and Concord.
No, sir, the bulk of 1A is coming from the state. It's coming from the
Let me
state.
add 30 seconds to what Jeff said that I think will get us to the end of this presentation. And then George can rest his legs for the next one. That'll be even more robust. And I think it's that, you know, for me, I'm an engineer, I'm a dollar cents, you know, it's just very black and white. Whatever the cheapest method of getting this stuff treated is the way we should go. And that model has worked forever, since the beginning until 2-3 weeks ago, when we started talking about this, and I added some of my own grievances in the last meeting on the exact same thing that Doug's mentioned, and you brought up, is like, hey, Harrisburg's numbers would be different if we weren't sewer constrained. It's like, or just like Midlands wouldn't be if they weren't water constrained. So we all have these constraints, and we've all shared the pain exactly equally, and it's been easy. And now we're talking about, instead of one center treatment plant that shares, everybody benefits from the same way, we can all easily just say, yeah, Rocky River, we can expand it. We share the cost, we share the benefits, we're all in it together. Everything else that we're doing moving forward is not that. And there has to be something fundamentally different about how we make those decisions. I don't think your proposal is off base at all. I'm actually a little bit more extreme about it. Why not consider increasing Muddy Creek to 3 million gallons if we can send that much over there from the southern part of it? I don't know what options are out there, but I know that we wouldn't have the same, we wouldn't be dumping into the same water body there, so you wouldn't have the same permitting issues of dumping everything upstream of Rocky River plant. So I think those are worth exploring. Does it work? I don't know if the dollars and cents work, and I don't think it's about constraint. I just think it's about, as we get down the road and the benefits aren't shared equally, that's okay. But then the costs can't be shared equally. There could be a point where, and again, I've mentioned this to some of you, like, obviously Harrisburg, what if Harrisburg wanted to spend $150 million of Harrisburg money and put a 2 million right here? This all wouldn't hurt anybody else if our residents were like, hey, we want to grow the way we want to grow and we want to pay for it. Why couldn't we stroke a check or take on the debt service on 100% of that, still run through this organization? But we've got to think of those things. Those things just aren't there right now. I know I took more of my 30 seconds, so I'll rest my piece.
I will jump in and say we did take a very high level analysis of what that cost would look like to turn that pump station around. There's a lot of assumptions you have to make of how much flow are you pumping? Do you force main it to the existing gravity sewer and go from gravity there? Do you extend the gravity to 24/27 and put it in gravity there? Depending on how much flow it is, you're going to have to parallel that gravity that's out there as a project into the future. But you're in the orders of magnitude of $10 to $20 million to do something like turning that pump station around. Because you either have an extremely long force main that goes all the way to Muddy Creek, or you have it going into the existing gravity sewer line, which is only a 15 and an 18 inch that's already serving the majority of town, that you have to parallel. So those options do get pretty expensive pretty quick. And I see Thomas jump up. He may have a few.
Sure, and an operational input there as well. You know, we've talked about, or you were talking about a large portion of flow to split. The current flows that we're seeing from that particular pump station that you're talking about are in the 60,000 gallon per day range on average overall. There is some robust growth happening that's going to feed into that area, but right now those flows are not to the levels that you're discussing here. So as far as the benefit of doing that, you know, the current benefit is there's always so much flow that comes into that pump station. That's my point.
And I would also like to turn around and say, this is not something we just look at in this one scenario. We've talked about a plan in Mount Pleasant potentially. That's going to be part of the next discussion. Part of that discussion came, if we build that plant, could we turn Raccoon Hollow, which is a pump station now that serves the arena and the old airport road area, can we turn it around, send it down the force main that's now going to Rocky River back to Mount Pleasant to get that flow off of off of Rocky River and put it on Mount Pleasant side of things. Those things are being looked at across the board of how can we best utilize any piece of infrastructure that we have. So it's not just something we look at in one area. That's things that we've looked at in multiple areas of options that could present themselves that are, I don't want to call them non-cost factors because they are cost factors. It does have cost in it, but when you're trying to decide whether you're going to slide a plant there, that can be an outside factor that provides an additional benefit that that maybe you don't look at when you just look at a cost per gallon number. That you're looking at the overall good there. So this all gets very challenging. I don't think there's bad ideas. There's ideas that need to be explored and proved to be good or bad. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea to start with. It may end up not being a good idea, but they're worth looking at and trying to
I just
consider.
think all of this needs some type of policy revision on how cost sharing goes so that our respective jurisdictions can still pursue the things that we want, because not everybody's gonna be all in. I love Mount Pleasant. I'm not sure my residents would love building a sewer plant out there. And they're too small, they're not gonna build it themselves. That's why we're regional. But as long as we've all had some equity in it, it was easy. As opposed to now, as we expanded new, if there is a project in Concord that creates a job or a housing benefit that the council thinks is important, they should be able to use their money to solve that problem and not be stuck in the bounds of, is it just a sewer problem? It's not. Sewer is one component of what the communities are trying to do. If there is a certain tax base implication in Harrisburg, our council is going to be more likely to say, hey, we could take some of that tax dollar and use general fund to supplement utilities because it's good for the town. You can't do that, right? I mean, you have the blinders on at WSACC if this is our mission. The jurisdictions have to figure out how are we going to be willing to kick in and do cost share so that the pent up demand in Midland can move forward. Your priorities move forward. Everybody's going to have a little bit different, and that's okay. It just can be different. We got to figure it out.
How much funding did you get? Did you say-
11 million from the state.
So in theory, if 1A was accepted at 18.8 and it came in really, really close to that, and your 11 million that the state granted the town is used for its share of those costs. In theory, like you said, under the current policy, Midland residents wouldn't get a break on their sewer bill just because the town got the money granted. They'd still be paying their
They're
share.
paying through Concord.
Just like everybody else would pay their share. So I think it's a very valid conversation, Rob and Mayor, that, I think that's kind of both sides of the coin there, right? Do non-recipients of that expansion and that improvement, they bear the cost just like the residents and the recipients of that benefit. They still have to bear the cost, even though their town managed to secure, grant money to help cover more than 50% of the improvement cost. So
We just got to figure out what that whole
yeah.
equation looks like. I mean,
yeah, and that's
70
Spider-
million
that spider
for
web
one,
looks a lot more.
for the other. It's just there's grants all over.
What's been left out of the discussion is that there's 1,200 homes that will be tying into that pump station. So that is going to get closer to 300 at the end of the day. And that flow switch would permanently take us off the Rocky River plant forever. None of our future growth area would drain to the Rocky River plant. So we would be permanently off the Rocky River plant, and that has not been brought up either. Whereas right now, flow is up.
A lot of stuff to buy.
So there'll be a lot more discussions. I'm sure. Are we okay to have George continue?
Well, I get, he continue with this presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. yes.
Let's go. Next one.
Be quietly.
Most.
Conversation, we're.
So now we're gonna talk about the big plan, Rocky River, right? And as you all alluded to it, most of the flow goes there. So same kind of agenda. We'll look at the master plan flows. We're gonna talk about the Rocky River, the assets you have there. We're gonna talk about, alternatives. We wanna push the existing infrastructure harder and get a, kind of a paper re-rate, a couple of them to give extra capacity if we can. That's one alternative. And then we can, can explore alternatives to go bigger than that. But along with all that, we're gonna talk about other locations for treatment plants, like you all talked about. All that blends in there, and in the end, we're gonna have a table that kind of outlines all the alternatives with all their capital costs and then their dollar per gallon next to them. I'm sure you will continue the discussion there. So let's get to it. The master plan flows, again, you've seen that table over there on the left, that comes from the master plan, with a total flow projected. And then on the right is the similar graph that I showed you for Muddy Creek. That's now for Rocky River, right? And again, the step-like black line is the capacity. So we went from 26.5 MGD to 30, and now to 34 MGD, kind of in the center there, right there, right? So that 34 MGD, how long will it last, right? If we go with a blue, again, let's forget the blue because it has some uncertainty. Let's stay with a green line and the dotted lines of the state, the 80 and 90%. What do we say there at the bottom? It is projected, the annual average flow is projected to cross the 80% threshold in 2029. So it means like at 34 MGD by 2029, if projections are true, we have to be designing, we have to be addressing and planning and designing something. And this study kind of addresses or answers the mail on that 80%. So you are ahead there. But the 90%, which is 2033, at 90%, we have to have a project ready to construct. So by 2033, we need to be done with design and permitting or whatever the next project is. That's the takeaway. Originally, the master plan looked at expanding the plant and our facilities plan looked at expanding the plant to 40 MGD and 50 MGD. And I will show you, as again, I was talking about wastewater treatment and how we like to do things with redundancy and symmetry and things like that, and pushing the existing infrastructure, it became evident that if we were gonna go to a big project, it shouldn't be a 40 MGD plant, it should be a 45 MGD plant. And I will explain why in a little bit. And we shouldn't be going for a 50 MGD plant. We should be going to 54. So for our analysis, we're scratching now the 40 and the 50s, and we're going to talk about 45 and 54. And I will explain why. But again, same thing, same table that we were looking at just now from the master plan. Now we have taken out Midland's flow because Midland goes to Muddy Creek, right? So we have this revised total there, the third row that kind of shows the flow that is supposed to go to Rocky River. And then what are the needs? We read, right? The needs beyond 34 MGD, how much flow do we need if we're just going with annual average daily flow, not max month? That's the fourth row. But if I went with max month flow, and depending on what picking factor I'm using, and max month flow is my permitted flow, and I'm using the most conservative or the smallest peaking factor of 118 from historical data over there on the collection system over there on the right. You could be needing a 7 MGD plant soon, or you could be needing a 1 MGD plant soon, whichever assumption we want to believe. So we're going to give you a menu of options to address the small bites, okay, 1, 2 MGD, and we're going to give you alternatives that will take big bites and take you to plus 9, plus 11, plus 18 MGD. This is a very busy graph and I don't want you to worry about it. The only point I want to make here is that over here on the left is the process area infrastructure built into the Rocky River. We have screens, we have pumps, we have grit removal, we have clarifiers, and we checked all these against, to maximize our infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, and push the existing plant with a goal to give us an easy low-hanging fruit expansion to 35 or 36 MGD. Remember, we are going to be at 34 MGD once we expand the plant at phase 4 by 2027, right? And with red are only the facilities or the process areas that we are short of capacity. So what you see a lot of black and not a whole lot of red. So the point I want to make.
That was a bird.
Yeah.
That was a bird.
Everybody wake up.
The point I want to make is that there is not a whole lot of red. So we think indeed there is a whole low-hanging fruit project, and we can take the 34 MGD plant that we have now, and we call it a paper re-rate. It's not really a paper re-rate. We still have to do things and take it to 35 MGD or 36 MGD. And I'm going to use the word easily, but nothing is easy. But again, compared to the other ones, the 45 and 54, much easier. So let's go look at the expansion alternatives, right? So I'm going to drop the 35 MGD now, or the 36. We're gonna push 2 extra MGD, right? I'm going to talk about the facilities that we need to expand the Rocky River to go to 36 MGD. But then the big alternatives to go to 45 and 54, they are not technology based anymore, just like we did for Muddy Creek. For Rocky River, we already picked the technology back when we expanded from 26.5 to go to 34. So now we're going to be expanding the same way we're doing now with the, forget about the high purity oxygen plant that you used to have. We're going to have, traditional, conventional, activated sludge plant with blowers, and that's what we're doing. So that's what you're going to see in the next alternatives, not technology-based alternatives, all flow or capacity-based alternatives. This slide kind of talks about the menu of other projects besides Rocky River, right? So right there at the top left, we talked about Rocky River. Can we go to 35? That's plus 1 of additional capacity. Go to 36, plus 2 MGD of additional capacity. We can go to 45 MGD, which is plus 11 MGD from 34. Or we can go to 54, which is 20 MGD. But then there is, the potential of doing something at the Concord grounds. We looked at that high level costs, and the orange table over here on the right, it kind of summarizes the flow that that area, the Coral Creek confluence with Wolf Meadow C, that's actual flow right now, 2.2 anyone MGD of average flow that area sees today, and is projected, 3.3 MGD of average flow in the future from already approved developer capacity.
Yeah,
That's Thomas.
Yes, and the current estimated flows are based on some temporary flow metering data over the past month, to get a general baseline there.
So that area today, like with a flipping of a switch, as you were using the term, you could, if you drop a plant right there, it would have 2 MGD to support it. So we're looking at building a plant there from 3 MGD all the way to 5. We have there 4.2 MGD showing. Again, just because we're using maximum factors. So the one option is that, and you're looking at the cost of that. Then we looked at Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant, we looked at the projections from the master plan. And really Mount Pleasant, there was a discussion about doing a half MGD first and then a 1 MGD. It seems like from the projections that a half MGD will be short-lived. So we skipped the half MGD and we looked at 3/4 of an MGD or 1 MGD plant there. And if you go to the last bullet, a 0.75 MGD wastewater treatment plant there would cost 37 million, about that. Again, with this planning level cost. But in the bullet before last, we did also cost benefit analysis for Mount Pleasant to continue between the status quo, upgrade, sewer lines and maintain pump stations, continuing to pump down to Rocky River. That's the $31.6 million net present value versus building a new treatment plant there, what will gonna cost 37 million. And it has a net present value of $46 million because we still have to do some kind of rerouting of flows, and these pump stations 1, 2, and 3, they have to reverse kind of their direction of where they are pumping. So some of the linear improvements there cannot be avoided. Like the new treatment plant will need linear improvements to go with it. So you can see that the net present value delta between the status quo or building a new plant is in favor of the status quo by $15 million. But Mount Pleasant, building a plant there is an option. So is Concord Grounds building a plant as an option. So this gives you kind of an idea of the other locations. We're going to hit about these other locations again in the end. Now we're going to talk about Rocky River and what we think that needs to be done at Rocky River, and you pick the alternative you want or you think it makes sense. So this one kind of talks about what do we need to do to stretch our plant and be able to do 35 or 36 MGD. So our screens now are a little short on capacity. Our main pump station on paper is short on capacity, but our main pump station is still hasn't been commissioned as part of the phase 4. We're putting 2 new pumps there out of the 4. So we don't know, the pumping is a dynamic system. So we may be able to hit the 77 that we need versus the 76.4 that I'm listing there. Based on the design, our headward screens are short or capacity. Aeration air is only short by 100 standard cubic feet per minute, SCFMs, and our RAS pumping seems to be short. But we think we can address all these, and with a seal of approval of a professional engineer, we can prove to the state that really these facilities can handle 36 MGD. So what remains is on the right side to get the plant where it needs to be. Some hydraulic improvements to change some pipes and address some bottlenecks, raise some tank walls so we don't overflow at higher flows, add a 3rd centrifuge and a cake pumping. That's a big project that was already priced as part of the existing ongoing project, and it was shelved for later. And then do something with a scrubber for the incinerator. So that column on the right is kind of the scope of work of what it would take to get us to 36 MGD. And it's a short list of projects. Now, let's go talk about the bigger alternatives. And I will explain now why we scratched the 40 MGD and we want to go to 45 MGD. At Rocky River right now, we have 4 distinct treatment trains, right? A treatment train is comprised of one primary clarifier, one aeration basin, and 2 secondary clarifiers. So that group makes us, you know, a treatment train. So if I have 4 now, and I'm telling you that I'm gonna re-rate the plant to 36 MGD, what is that? 36 divided by 4, that's 9 MGD per treatment train. So when I expand this plant, I want to go in and add another train, right? 4 times 9, and I want to add another one. 5 times 9 takes you to 45. Again, because in wastewater treatment, we want symmetry, we want redundancy, we don't want surprises. I want to turn off a reactor and the next reactor operates the same way as the other one that we took off, right? So I don't want to short the expansion and build you a miniature 5th train, right? So 5 times 9, it will take you 45 MGD. Now you can tell me, no, George, I want you to build a smaller treatment train, and we can do that. But in collaboration with your staff, we think this is the way to go if you want it to go big. 4 trains now times 9, 36. When we're gonna expand, we're gonna do 5 times 9, takes you to 45. And that's what this shows with pink or purple. These are the new facilities that need to be built to support a 45 MGD plant. And you can see there in the center kind of how one primary clarifier, one circle there, the rectangle tank is the aeration basin, and then the 2 secondary clarifiers, the 2 circles there. That's our new train. But along with that, upstream, I need new headworks to supplement the existing headworks that is right there. And then I need a new disinfection system, probably to replace the big footprint that is taken by the chlorine. And then the biggest thing and the biggest sink of capital is I need a new pump station here. So in addition to the main pump station that is right there that you have expanded many, many times within the existing building, there is no room anymore there. We got to build a new one to kind of receive all the flows from the north east region of your service area. So that is a 45 MGD alternative. Note now that my headworks and the disinfection and the new pump station are going to be built, the concrete we're going to be put in, it will have to be good for whatever expansion you're planning next. So I cannot build a 45 MGD pump station and then a 54 MGD, oops, I need to build something else, right? The concrete, because it takes a lot to dig a hole 50 feet in the ground, and we said thinking concrete, we want to put the concrete that we foresee in the future needing, right? We want to plan for the future. So this 45 MGD is loaded heavier in cost because my new influent pump station, my new headworks, and my new disinfection are easily expandable to 54 MGD. The structure itself is sized hydraulically to pass 54 MGD. And the only thing that I need to add is just mechanical equipment. And mechanical equipment in the grand scheme of things doesn't cost anything compared to concrete and excavation and site work and yard piping. So this is the 45 MGD alternative. So now, this, looks simple and, nice, small rounds, circles and squares. But in reality, this is a site plan, and the red line that you see here is all the piping that will go underground to connect these shapes together, large diameter pipes, 2 kind of sheets, the north part and the south part. This is how you connect these nice circles and rectangles. I just want to show you how busy it gets when we start laying yard piping. All right, now we'll go to the 54 MGD alternative. The same thing. Now we're going to go and do 6 trains, right? 6 times 9, 54 MGD. But I haven't built because you can decide whether you go to 54 MGD without going to 45 MGD. So the two, as you will see them in the end, will be completely independent, the costs. You can skip 45 But here you have the same headworks, the same UV disinfection, the same pump station as we had at the 45 MGD, right? And then at the bottom there of the page, you have 2 trains added, 2 on top of the 4 existing. And again, connecting all this together is not an easy task. And let's go to the capital. All right, capital costs. Bear with me. Here there is more breakdown, so you can see kind of the thought process, how we come up with these. So the process area totals, the first row in the costs over there, I'm carrying only the 36 MGD alternative. I have the 45 and the 54. These are all, you know, if you remember that very busy table with all the process areas that we have at Rocky River, this is the total of all the stuff we have to do within the plant, right? Process area total. But then we have to do site work on top of that. We got to do yard piping. We got to do electrical and instrumentation and controls. And the percentages that you see there are, you know, standard percentages that are used in this type of estimates. These are also comparable to the ongoing project that you are undertaking now, which is a big project, right? So these are about, they are close to the percentages that appear there now. So then we go to direct construction costs, once you add all that. Then we have the contractor overhead, profit, general conditions, and so on. We add the contingency 35% because, again, I do not have detailed plans. The only thing that I have is that aerial and those yard pipes that I was showing you. And that's how we built this estimate, right? So there is a lot of unknown, how deep that the pipe needs to go. There is a lot of uncertainty in these numbers. So we carry anywhere between 20 and 50%. That's the standard of care at this level of estimate, the contingency percentage that we need to carry. Bonding and insurance. So then you go to total estimated construction costs in today's dollars, but then we have to escalate them because, you know, this is not going to happen today, right? So then you have that little table on the left that explains the timeline, the schedule. The 36 MGD alternative, we're going to start in 2028 and be done in 2030. Actually, the 36 MGD alternative is a building block of the other 2. We are assuming that you want to do the 36, maybe as a phase 1 or 1A, but it's a building block to 45 and 54, whereas 45 and 54 are completely independent of each other, if that makes sense. So the 45 MGD alternative, we say we're going to start in 2029 and be done in 2033, and that's 4 years of construction. And then the 54 MGD will start in 2029, but will be done in 34, and that's 5 years of construction. So that gives you the escalation percentage that's factored in these cost estimates. Then you have your engineering costs, which are explained what percentages are used there to get to the total estimated capital costs. And we are around 39 million for the 36 MGD, 490 for the 45 MGD, and 630 million for the 54 MGD. And then you get your dollar per gallon. Now, I guess I didn't strike. I was supposed to strike that to 34 MGD. I wouldn't look at the cost per gallon from 34 MGD because we think the low-hanging fruit of 36 MGD is a given. You should be doing it. So the dollar per gallon from there to 45, 36 to 45 is what you should be looking at. But, you know, you got the comparison there. I will pause here for a little bit. I will take any questions you may have now. The next slides, we're going to go now and look at all the projects together. Everything that I have presented here, you're going to see them in a summary table, and you can have the discussion that you want. I'm going to move on to the next, and maybe we can come back here if you want. So here, this table shows all the projects we talked about. We have two tables. The bottom table is Muddy Creek because again, Muddy Creek right now, it's an island of its own a little bit. And these are the two projects we talked about, right? Going with additional capacity from 0.3 MGD from 0.3 to 0.6, that's 0.3, or going all the way to 1 MGD, so the additional capacity is 0.7. That's for Muddy Creek down at the bottom, the capital costs and the cost per gallon. That answers the dollar per gallon that we're trying to figure out before. And up the top table is the Rocky River mixed with the Concord ground and the Mount Pleasant, right? So the capital decrease in order of capital costs, of course, the smaller capital, small additional capacity, right? And then you got the cost per gallon. And then we explain over there all the way to the right, kind of what drives the cost, why the costs are so different per gallon. To give you an idea where these are coming from. The next table is the same table, but we have sorted the projects on the column on the cost per gallon. Exactly the same table, but now they are sorted on a cost per gallon basis.
One thing that Thomas and myself challenged George with here, and I think they've done a good job, is we've all heard and experienced the nightmares when you're looking at projects at a planning level. And somebody says that this project's going to cost $100 million. And then you get a year and a half or 2 years in it, and it's a $250 million project. We've all heard those, whether it's a 20 million that becomes 50 million, it doesn't matter. We've tried our best here to be as real with the numbers because we would rather have the $150 million project cost 130 than for us to say it's going to be 60 million and end up being 160 million. And so we've tried to capture all of the cost escalation, engineering, construction. I would try to catch all that so we don't have that situation to where you get down the road and you have that extreme sticker shock. That obviously, you know, when you get into those contingencies and you get into showing some of those, you can adjust those numbers to make these numbers look better, to look lower, but you're increasing your risk of the ultimate project costing more than you've So I know these are some big numbers. We're optimistic and hopeful that maybe they wouldn't end up being this big, but we also didn't want to fall into that trap of having that project show up down the road in a couple of years and, whoa, we didn't know it was going to be that much. So that's kind of the reason behind some of the methodology. And there's no perfect way to do this. There's best practices and there's assumptions you need to make. And we've tried to stay pretty conservative on that.
Yeah.
Second to the bottom is 2 MGD, right? Not 20. That's going.
I saw that too. I was like,
Yeah,
I'll take that.
Let's do that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
If
Try to miss it.
you flip to the next slide, it went to 2. I did the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, no.
Thomas can fix it.
Solved it, Jenna.
Sure. So a little context for this in this particular project, Brown and Caldwell is tasked, as George said, with carrying this forward to conceptual design for a selected alternative in each area. And so that is where they are headed from here. The Rocky River options, as George has said, are kind of building blocks on one another. It can be 36 to 45 to 54. It can be 36 to 54. There are options there. But Brown and Caldwell will take, based on direction, at some point in the near future, will take those forward to conceptual design for one in each area.
And so the challenge that I think the board kind of gave us as staff and me as director was to give us options, to give us choices that can be made of small, big, that we can kind of figure out to fit into what makes the most sense for us to meet needs into the future. And yes, last month when we started this, a lot of the discussion came down of basically it's like, how much of a buffer do we want to have? How aggressive do we want to get to having available capacity, whether it's at Muddy Creek, whether it's at Rocky River, whether, wherever that is, how aggressive do we want to be? Have, surplus capacity, if we want to call it that, available capacity, for developers, or the projects to come along. So the numbers get big, the numbers get real. That's why we have Wendy look at and run you some little bit of information. And basically, at assuming a 5% interest rate, it's $7 million a year per $100 million fixed cost is about what it runs. Hopefully we would do better than 5%. We have in our previous borrowings, but we again can't assume that. We just don't know what the environment will be. To give you an idea, our current debt service between plants and interceptors is about $12 million total. Is that correct, Wendy? I think that's when I looked at the budget per year. Annual debt service is about 12 million. I think that's right. It's in that order of magnitude. So you look at quickly increasing our level of debt service percentage wise dramatically with some of these options that are out there. Our goal with staff is to provide you guys with the information y'all need to try to make these decisions, whether that's further presentations, whether that's a work session where you want to get down into the weeds of some of this stuff some more, we can do that. But just now it's time to turn around to questions. I mean, how do we want to proceed?
Why is 0.75 million gallon for Mount Pleasant cheaper than 0.7 at Muddy Creek? And we already have stuff at Muddy Creek, so make that make sense to me.
George, you
And the grounds. Grounds be a brand new.
Yeah. Yeah, so why is Muddy Creek, why is the cost there so much higher? You've got less capacity for more cost, whereas in Mount Pleasant, there's more capacity for less cost. And we already have land and assets in Muddy Creek. Why is that?
The cost estimate for Muddy Creek is more robust, more detailed on the top table. The methodology is a little different. So the Muddy Creek one is more detailed with takeoffs. That's why one reason is that. I guess if we were to compare apples to apples, we're looking at the 0.75 versus the 0.7, right? The peaking factors also, the peaking factors there. So if looked at 0.7 MGD for Muddy Creek and look at Mount Pleasant, Mount Pleasant peaking factors and the influent pump station is going to be a little different than the Muddy Creek, and that's what drives most of the cost. From what I recall, also the Mount Pleasant design doesn't include an equalization tank. We have equalization for Muddy Creek because you have equalization today and you're used to it, so we're kind of continuing on that. So one difference is there. So for what I can think of, the difference is with the influent pump station and the equalization between the 2 points.
George, is there not a fair amount of retrofit for Muddy Creek? So for example, turning the existing aeration basins into different sludge holding and that sort of thing. Is that part of that or not?
Yeah, that's part of that too. There is existing infrastructure there that you're reusing on Muddy Creek. But believe it or not, a greenfield plant is easier to build, but because there's nothing there, there's nothing on the way. You build everything compact. Your piping is shorter. Everything is kind of easier to build. So there is differences between the plants, and that's the difference between the two costs. But it's a valid point. The other point is also if I had to put my hat on one of the two estimates, I will go with the Muddy Creek one. It's more detailed than the Mount Pleasant.
George, and this may be a question for Thomas, kind of, he's doing it, but do your projections on page 4 account for the updated jurisdictional numbers that came over? Because I think that might drive some of my conversation later.
No, that does not. So the numbers on George's presentation are from the master plan numbers, just like last month. We are working through that data and looking at that, but that's not reflected there.
Understood. Yeah, that's the answer. I'll save the rest for the end when we get into whether 54 is the right number or 45 is the right number. I think if the other communities are similar to Harrisburg, there's really only one we have two options. Just you can just scratch and claw and get $1 million here, $1 million there, or do the biggest on this list. And I still think we'll have allocations at 54. But we'll get to that conversation at the end.
Yeah, I think we're getting into water challenges then, 54, and that's the other thing, obviously, we're gonna get to that point anyway, at some scale, either now or later. But so think about your utility customers today saddled with the sewer debt on top of how much you think an IBT is gonna cost? Another couple hundred to get the water and to fight for it and then to actually get it here, so.
Well, and to give you an idea of that, the 54 million option would create about $40 million in annual debt service, and our current annual budget's 28 million. So we would look at a 140% increase in our budget from WSAC's standpoint to get into that order of magnitude. It doesn't mean it's wrong. That just means we need to understand that.
That was my next question.
Yes.
What's gonna rate the cost?
Yes. So those are really rough numbers, but it's our annual operating budget's about 28 million and 500-600 million would be
So
35-40 million.
our
annual.
decisions really come to not what we don't worry about the feds.
Yeah.
Talking about what are the jurisdictions willing to spend? And that's different in every jurisdiction. If you tell, I'll speak for Harrisburg since that's who I speak for. If you tell me, hey, 60 million, you're 10% of this, and we'll give you a 2 million gallon allocation out of that extra 20, that's the equivalent of me building 2 MGD plant for 60 million. Where do I sign? Absolutely. And I have customers with a tax base that are benefit to the town. So to me, it's I have no problem with that. I have quality tax base additions and room for them. Concord won't pay 90% of that same thing. I mean, Concord and Apples want to pay the other 90% of that. That's a different calculation.
We know what the cost of sewer is. We don't know what the value of sewer is.
And I do think we would have,
Value of the growth on the back end. So that's different it's different in different parts of my town. Different parts of Concord, that number is different. So, I do think we need some workshops to understand, put in the spot, would Concord pay for 150 million for the one on the grounds right now if you had a really good end user that you wanted? But that would be a conversation, right? Like Harrisburg and Annapolis are like, we're not interested in our 40% of that. You guys want to buy our 40% of that and build, obviously WSACC still owns, operates and everything, but you take 100% of that debt service. I don't think I should be able to tell you no, if you want to. But we make it, there's got to be some options here for the community. Maybe, Midland has
But
some
that's the same.
major industrial user you want to bring in or create a bunch of jobs, bunch of economic growth, really put, a feather in the cap. Maybe locally you're like, hey, we'll take on that debt service. It's worth it to us. As to where.
But that creates the same scenario we're looking at right now, where we have some people who have lots of capacity and have had lots of capacity. And if you said, will you pay it for all of it? And Concord and Kannapolis decides to pay all of it, that leaves the three of you out. And as a result of that.
By choice.
Yeah, by choice.
But I think that is
By
that's a
choice.
conversation. I don't know if that's where we go.
But that doesn't allow any future growth, and that's the point I'm making. Even if you said, no, I'm not willing to put in, or your board says, no, I'm not willing to put in, if everybody else is doing the same thing, then we're coming back to the very same scenario we're at right now, is that what happens when grows like he wants to grow? What happens when Mount Pleasant grows like they want to grow, or you, same way? Then we're arguing about the same scenario we're arguing about right now. It's what's the fairest and perfect allocation for all of this money we're spending.
And I would like to point out two facts with that. One, when it came to decisions such as that, we would have the LGC that we would have to deal with, whether they would let us borrow that kind of money. The state, whether they would give us an authorization to construct that much capacity without maybe having the, historical data and the proof to show that we need it. Those would be hurdles to jump over. And then the fact in the last 18 years, our county has only grown 4.5 MGD in the last 18 years with everything that's going on and actual flow. And we've been right less than 5 MGD of growth in the last 18 years. So we do have to temper some of that and make sure, to your point, work sessions where we're really getting into some data to make sure we're making
We gotta
wise
coordinate
decisions.
Because we flip back to page 4 and look at those flow projections, can we do that? So this is where, and I diverge wildly, and we've discussed it privately and in this meeting, where it's the operating versus the allowable.
Correct.
Just, yeah, there you go. So we look at I'll just look at Harrisburg, because I know Thomas is working through this with our staff. And sometimes the communication just isn't as clear between, it's a game of telephone when it gets down the list. So we ask the jurisdictions, hey, send us everything that you're going to do from now to 2030. What we're going to do is restricted by the capacity that we have. And we have a couple of kind of secondary projects on the list. They're like, well, these are maybe projects that could get in if these other ones don't do it, and we'll play musical chairs. But I know, because I'm in our allocation committee, that number is nowhere close. So you heard me at the last meeting, it's like, I don't understand what 200,000, that doesn't make any sense. So if you look at base year in Harrisburg at 1.56, we're saying 2030 at 2.09. Yesterday, we sent Thomas our actual projects that have been requested, that have went through pre-submittals, that are sitting there, that if we have the capacity and the political approvals, they're ready to go within the next 3 years. That number is 2 million. So that 2030 number goes from 2.09 to 3.6. Well, if everybody's off 60%, that 30 million in 2030 is 42 in 5 years. And so that 20, when we get out, is 54. Well, just take again Harrisburg's allocation. We need roughly an additional 1.7 million just to meet the things that have been requested yesterday.
Yep.
At 54, we would get an additional 1.7 million of our allocation over. So if we built 54, Harrisburg would be out of capacity tomorrow. If we just approved everything that we have that is very well accepted, these are high quality projects. They're not things that are pipe dreams. We can approve everything in our meeting and then still not be where we're at. 54 isn't enough for Harrisburg. That's different in every jurisdiction, but I think it's important that we go back as a group to our planners and engineers and say, are you giving the full, what are you giving? Let me see what you're giving over. And maybe people were better at communicating it than my staff, and that's just a unique, maybe we're only off 2 million.
And I really appreciate Shannon sending this out before the meeting. I mean, that was huge just for me and my town engineer, just to be able to look at the information before the meeting, because then I felt like I could come in informed and I wasn't catching up or behind the curve. I mean, and it's the same, I'm seeing the same exact thing. I mean, this is it. And so I mean, in the future, I would request that information is sent out so that we can take a look at it. Like on the flow switch discussion, there was discussion with Kannapolis and Concord about that. And I had to find out about it through my engineer, who found out about it through a mid-level with Concord. I mean, I just was, as a board member here, I wasn't involved in any of those discussions, and I have no idea, and I'll find out about it, that, and then I come into last month's meeting and I hear the idea. I don't feel like I'm getting equal information and the same information at the same time. I feel like I'm behind the curve and I'm not able to come prepared, whereas other people are more prepared than me.
Well, I'm used to getting the info. Every time Chad and I have talked about this, I like to request it to be there like a couple days in advance so that we can kind of review these. I send it out to my board a week in advance, all the supporting documents that go on the agenda, and then they call me all week and say, what is this? What is this contract? What is that contract? And I'm able to head things off so the meetings aren't taking forever and we can inform people one-on-one. So I mean, that's something that I plan to kind of request monthly now that I'm just have a little bit more capacity. We've staffed up over the place, so I plan to be more involved here. So I, recommend that go to everybody, maybe a 3-day. We'll send it out on Friday, just add the supporting documents, email it out.
And as we discussed, because Rob was the one that requested that information to be, so I sent it to all board members. That's just not something we've done in the past. I'm happy to do it. It's no problem for that to be a change in the way that we operate. I'm happy to do that. It's just not been a historical way that WSAC has operated, but that's obviously a simple change to be made.
Well, we've got these huge things coming. It's just a completely different environment. And some of the things that have been discussed would have a large impact on us.
And I think from WSAC, the challenge that we face is we're not involved in any of this from a project approach. So just like the master plan data, WSAC gave no input on flow projections. We led and encouraged discussions between our consultant and the member jurisdictions in the county, but WSAC gave no input on that. That was purely jurisdictional numbers that drove these lines. And then when we make requests on what's your projects in your pipelines, what do you see that could happen by that 2030 horizon? We can only count on what data we get back. We can't.
I 100% agree.
We can't see anything further than that.
And I don't
Yeah.
fault the process of
Right.
requesting that at all, so please don't.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But I just think the people that we're requesting it from, our staffs, if it's not Jeff, if it's not me, the wording might be confusing. When you say, well, tell me what your projections are. Well, what does that mean? Is that everything that's in pre-submittal? Is that everything that's had a rezoning? Is that everything that we've given a preliminary allocation or a permit? And so you might be getting something from everybody else, or maybe just my staff's confused and I need to be better at
Well, I think-
doing it with them. But
I mean, thinks like, we're years later, looking back at an unknown time that we still have very few data points on what this restricted allocation sort of thing has caused us. So, I mean, I would suggest that if we updated these numbers today to exactly what every single person around this room thought was right, we're going to sit here in 2 years looking at the same chart again and say, man, we were way off. Like, it's always going to be wrong, right? So I think to me, it's about the flexibility of making the decisions and having the data updated often enough to know when those black lines need to jump up. Is it next week? Is it 20 years from now? Is it? So I think it's not really rigid. It paints a picture that says, hey, we've got quite a few expansion challenges in the next short term. But when those happen and what the drivers are, how big we go, how much we spend, like, I mean, all that is still to be determined. So, it's not, while it's consequential and it's important that we understand why it was low or wrong or different, I still think it's more about the actionable.
yeah, I don't think it's worth going back and re-looking at anything. It's just a matter of when we go to make those decisions,
The numbers real, yeah.
Ours are again 60% off. So when we start talking about, well, what, obviously we have some low hanging fruit and stuff here. But the best dollar per gallon is obviously the biggest here at 35. When you get down to the 45 MGD, it's the most expensive, and honestly, it's the minimum we could go down to, in my opinion, looking at the numbers, that is even a responsible thing to do. And below that, it's not worth the effort. We should just tell people we're out of sewer and shut her down. But the $600 million project here at 54 MGD, we are a large, growing, successful county with a lot going on. Many counties that are our peers throughout the nation are doing projects like this as part of their normal operating procedures. This is new for us. We haven't had to get into this. We inherited a really substantial plant due to Kannapolis and the and Cannon, and so we've been able to kind of tweak that forward a little bit. But if you're just outside of Austin, if you're just outside of Washington, if you're just outside of Columbus, Ohio, these areas are building plants this size all the time. They're taking on the debt service. This is something that we're not used to, but we all probably need to go back jurisdictionally and say, what is the cost of growth? What is the value associated with that cost of growth? And then what do we have to do versus what do we want to do, and come up with a plan to do it. That's my short pitch on it. It's expensive, but
I did a little Google work the last couple of days too. That's always fun. Of large wastewater projects that are going on in our region. You know, Mooresville's looking at doing something that they're saying is going to be a $250–300 million range project for Mooresville. Rock Hill, I didn't find a ton of that, but Rock Hill's looking at doing a huge project that's going to be multi-hundreds of millions of dollars to do those projects. They're, to your point, they're around this 40, $50, $60 a gallon number is the number that's out there when you start getting into these big plants and these big projects. So, you know, I think, we want to make sure we're making wise decisions, that we're not overextending ourselves, but we're not also being short-sighted. We need to really,
I just don't want it to feel overwhelming for WSACC and WSACC staff. County's budget's 500 million. I don't remember what yours was around 300 if I remember last year in operational funds for Concord. Our budget passed in May, just north of $100 million for Harrisburg. Concord, or I'm sorry, Kannapolis is, you know, double us. So annually, our jurisdictions are spending over $1 billion every year. Yeah, it's going to cost 500 million to build something that lasts 50 years.
one thing also for us to keep in mind, and George, please weigh in here. Go to the chart that's the dollar per gallon. One thing to keep in mind, if we go to 45 and that cost per gallon is high to go to 45, but then we decide 10 years later, 6 years later, 8 years later to go to 54, the cost for that expansion per gallon from 45 to 54 is going to be, maybe it's not the, you know, the exact difference there. Maybe it's not 54, maybe it's not 19, maybe it's 23. But your expansion, when you go from 45 to 54, if you didn't go straight to 54, that second half of that is going to have been front weighted and is going to be more economical on a per gallon basis, whether you do it now or you do it later. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple math there. You see the delta is only 140 million. If you went from 45 to 54 MGD, it's only $140 million, say only, but the same capacity, you build the 9 MGD of additional capacity for 490 million the first time around, and then the second time you build it for only 140, the fraction of the cost, because we loaded the first one with the expansion in mind. When you put things in the ground, you set the concrete, you cannot be short-sighted. You have to be looking into the future. And even me, I'm nervous. It's 54 MGD, the build out that I need to put out there, or we need to even put a bigger build out in the ground, make it easier and expandable for the next project.
The other thing I want to bring up is looking back at that 18.9 million for the point, it should be 0.36 MGD. Because you're talking about taking it to 660.
Correct.
When you take out the fact that the state's contributed 11 million to that, that actually lowers the cost per gallon to $22. And I think that makes that project unique as well. I also think that project's unique because the Rocky River, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, really big financial decisions with big ratepayer impact. Whereas the Muddy Creek, the 660 is a very small project. It's peanuts. It can be done. It's not going to be a huge impact, financial impact. So, you know, I do think the Rocky River plant, that needs to be discussed more. There needs to be more consensus on that. But I would like to see that Muddy Creek expansion to 660 move forward. With 11 million in state grant money, when you apply that, it really lowers that cost per gallon. I think we just need to go ahead and do that. The flow switch idea, you know, building a bridge, you know, maybe that does make sense in the future at a 1 million gallon plant or a 3 million gallon plant. Maybe that does make sense. I'm open to that.
Are you suggesting,
But at that 660, it just does not make sense.
are you suggesting to shelve the 1 MGD discussion and just go with the 660 and pump the 1 MGD upgrade for a later?
I don't think financially it makes sense for WSACC to do the 1 MGD without doing some type of flow switch. Right. I don't think that's my WSACC hat on. That's not my Midland hat. That's my WSACC hat. And that's just, I think that's what it is. I think that's the bottom line, is that kicking in the difference between 11 and 18.9 is doable. Kicking in the difference between 11 and 40.3 is a world of difference. But maybe that idea has some merit. It takes some time to flesh out that idea. Maybe that makes sense in the future. When the plan is at 1 million gallons or at 3 million gallons, maybe that idea makes sense. But I think with 11 million in hand, we just need to move forward on that 1A. That was the staff recommendation. It's easy. We can do that quickly while we figure out the larger Rocky River expansion.
And again, the next steps on this is not necessarily a vote by the board. It's basically an agreement or a head nod that yes, we want George to move forward with the completion of the conceptual design of the alternative that we kind of pick. We could do that through a vote if we wanted to, but I think more of just an agreement that that's the direction we want to take. The other, and then the option there is that I would like a little bit of input on would be, I think it would be my recommendation to look at going ahead and doing the influent pump station and the headworks of that plant to the 1 MGD or bigger, you know, to be able to support that while you're doing this expansion, just to minimize potential sunk cost when you go to expand it. Now that will increase the 18 MGD by a couple $1 million, but it's not going to take it to $30 million. It's going to increase it to maybe 22 or 21. It's not going to be a dramatic shift that's going to result in us needing to borrow money or anything like that. So,
Yeah, so you're going a la carte with some of those improvements.
that would be my engineering
Yeah.
executive director recommendation to do that, to position yourself for the future and to minimize your risk of sunk costs.
Flow, did you say would come off of Rocky River from the 1,200 houses that are?
The existing flow in the pump station, you said is 60.
Right,
And
today
then-
about
well-
60,000 gallons. That does not account for the growth you're talking about.
And
with
then
those
the
houses.
1,200, that would be as close to 300 in my mind.
250, 300.
And that's just why that smaller expansion, that flow switch, just it puts
Yeah,
us
so
back, it puts us back to where we are today.
And Jeff,
Yeah,
Sorry, George.
you said once that, is that the Carolina Ridge project?
Yeah.
So once the expansion at Muddy Creek would have been done, whichever size is directed, and that flow comes off of Rocky River, that frees back up some of that Rocky River
That's what
That's the expectation, that
That's
capacity
happening, yeah.
back to Rocky River's primary recipient area.
But that paper flow for that 1,200 would switch from Rocky River to Muddy Creek as it's constructed, and then it would go to actual, so there wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to allocate out.
Right.
The expansion at that point, because it would flip.
So the pump station in discussion is a Concord pump station, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the current developer is going to be doing some upgrades to that pump station, and the existing force main will be able to work. Okay, so they're having to do some work to the pump station, but no force main work for that project, and the developer's doing that work. I think we all recognize that area, as you talk about, is prime for more growth, and I think in the future, additional projects come, at some point, that pump station has to be completely upgraded to a significant, to a real pump station, a bigger pump station. And I think that would be your time when you would really want to consider, because you would be looking at a new pump station and a new force main to service that area. Does that make sense to go back to Muddy Creek versus Rocky River? And at that point in time, you would take that actual flow off of Rocky River and free it up. And that's why I think it's important to have Muddy Creek positioned to be able to, as efficiently as possible, go to 1 MGD in the future.
And right now, there's not hardly any buy right projects that is in that area on that pump station. And I'm not sure the community would support a lot of additional residential in that area, but there's a lot of pent-up demand back in the Midland proper area, flow to the Muddy Creek pump. And I know we've got that interlocal in place that limits the impact of that area anyway. We can look, if it provides some level of comfort, we can look at extending one of the provisions in there. That provides some comfort.
I want to piggyback off something you just said too, which is the level of comfort of what people are gonna have for growth, right? So I wrote down two things, which is the growth and the, for lack of a better term, political appetite for that, right? So I think those are two things that, while those are really big unknowns, and I think about construction, you can think about it, like, it's slowed down significantly. The tariffs have impact. I know we don't know if they're gonna have any more impact or what that's gonna do. New construction has changed a lot, and we're not building at the level. Yes, we're behind, but it's costing more to build, so there's all of these other factors too, that I think that unfortunately, if I had the answer to those questions, I would not be sitting here. No offense to you guys, but I would be sipping on a drink with someone fanning me right now. But I think those are, really things that we need to talk about too, or to say, we don't know what a council's political appetite's gonna be in 4 years or in 8 years, but we don't want to be sitting on 54 MGD and then say, no growth, shut the doors, right? And just because we feel like we've got to support it, do we? It's the price and value conversation. And I think those are some of the conversations that we can only have with now councils, because we don't know what the future is going to be. And I think that's a really big piece of it. I think all of these are individual, but I'm looking at them as like this puzzle of like, okay, if we did this and we invested in the Muddy Creek, it does make sense to go to the 1. Okay, then, or do you go straight to the 1? Do you I kind of feel like they're all puzzle pieces that I've got to move around. And so I'm not sure. It's a lot of information to digest that, I think some further discussions, and yet we need to make some decisions. Right?
Well, and I think it all goes back to what Daryl brought up earlier. It's taking these WSACC resources and using them as holistically the best that we can, while not doing anyone wrong, but also balancing things, because what it comes down to from George's originals, we need about 7 MGD of capacity according to the current projections, current numbers that we're looking at over the next, 10, 15 years. How do we get that? We can do it through 2 and 9, and we've got some surplus off of those numbers. We can do it off of the 2, a 3, a 1. We can do it off of putting pieces of the puzzle together. It just comes down to how aggressive do we want to be? How do we want to solve the problem? And I think that The Muddy Creek one is a little more straightforward, I think we can all agree. And that I think moving forward with that conceptual design there makes sense. Rocky River, I don't know that we're at critical of a moment of having to make a decision, but one option that we have here on Rocky River is just tasking with George and his team to go in and do the conceptual design 254.
Yes.
Okay, there will be a 2 million chunk of that. There'll be a first 9 million chunk. There'll be another 9 million chunk. That doesn't mean that we have to then further the design to 54 when we decide later this summer or this fall, because it'll be that time period until he's completed that conceptual design. But while he's working on that conceptual design of all the steps that it takes to get to 54, we can be having all these discussions. And we can be polishing and tightening up some projection numbers and figuring out how we want to do that. So I think that could be a good way that we make some decisions that don't lock us in anything bad, that keeps the train moving while we can have discussions over the coming board meetings, if that makes sense.
Benefit from getting into the details.
Yeah.
In a work session and just digging into some, and I would ask, William, I'd like to bring up some economic development stuff in there. So can we schedule a closed session? And talk about some of those specifics that are.
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about specific projects, now it can't just be economic development. in
Yeah, right,
general.
no, very
But yeah,
specific.
Specific projects, yeah, we can go into closed session. Talk about that.
Because I think we could all benefit from getting together and talking about this in more detail with, and I appreciate what you say about the 2 and the 9, but it doesn't work in Harrisburg. Maybe everywhere else that's accurate and we're the only ones that need adjusted. But, 9 million or 9 MGD isn't going to solve it. And if that's what we're going with, that's fine. Maybe that's all the political appetite that we have as a county. I think politics are very different depending on what board you serve in this county. Is just watch YouTube and you can see the differences in meetings. So I don't want to handcuff anybody. And I don't want to be handcuffed from spending resources that local communities want to spend, furthering what they want to be as a local community. So I think that's a detailed discussion that we should all come and be ready to have, and those numbers. The 2 low-hanging fruits, I don't see anything wrong with them. I don't know enough about them. I don't have any problem with the first expansion at Muddy Creek, knowing we've got 12 million that we have to spend on it. And the other 6 million is kind of, insignificant compared to the rest of this, but then you're walking away from the options of the 1 MGD, in my opinion. Could we discuss that a lot more on what that looks like? So, again, I'm indifferent on that. The 2 MGD paper re-rate additions, I think, are obvious things to do if we can do them. Are they under contract for
Yeah.
this work already?
Yes.
So it's just a matter of you authorizing it and feeling good that it's not, yeah, so.
I think the Muddy Creek to me is really simple because, staff have said there's operational challenges to that one. That's why they're not, even if the money's there, they're not recommending that 1 million gallon. And then the financial impact of going to 1. I mean, it's too much. It's too much for us to ask y'all to do. That is not. So to me, it's just not the right time from an operational standpoint. I don't think that there's the demand right away for the 1 million gallon. So I think there's only one option when it comes to the Muddy Creek, and I just think we need to move on it. If y'all had that percentage of grant money available to do that large Rocky River expansion where the cost per gallon would shoot down to 22, that would make that much more appealing to do that Rocky River. And that's where we're at on the Muddy Creek. We've got the funding available. There's really only one option there that makes sense. We need to move forward on that, in my opinion, and then do the work session on the Rocky River and get a consensus on it.
I'd like to hear more too about just our other options that aren't on this, like reallocating, and the mayor mentioned it with with Midland, but are there other opportunities throughout the county to shift, flow around? I had mentioned Harrisburg might be interested in the Back Creek, Fruita Creek plant there. It's not on, is that 150 million for MGD like the grounds? Maybe we're not interested. Maybe Concord isn't interested at 100% at the grounds, but maybe Harrisburg's board is.
The only reason the grounds was looked at in site is because there's reuse customers there.
No, I understand.
That's the only reason that site was looked at from a standpoint of that. It originally started with it being more on site. We could get a site donated to us. It could have reuse customers. Then it moved downstream. But yes,
It's just very back of the napkin,
Yeah.
high level, like potential things like that just aren't on here. I hadn't heard about, reversing flow stuff really until just now, and the grounds. That one popped on my radar last month. Yeah, I think there's things as a work session that we can all benefit from.
I think you're gonna find some enthusiasm. Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was pointing to not need the next question
Oh.
after you finish.
I apologize. I think you're gonna find some enthusiasm organically when you start these other expansions. Rocky River has been expanding. It's been an expansion for how many years? I mean, probably. Right, so we're all used to it. And I'm not saying we're numb to it, but we're all used to it. We know where it's going, we know where it's headed. And then you throw in a Muddy Creek expansion like this. I think the enthusiasm that you're gonna find, not just from the service area, but also the building public, commercial or residential. It's just gonna create some attraction there to the county as a whole, right? Like I said earlier tonight, any growth in anywhere of the county is a net gain to the county. I mean, we're probably, if not the most fastest growing county in the state right now. Number 5. There's 95 other counties that probably want to be where we're at.
We'd love to.
Yeah, and so we are, I say that we're very blessed to be in the position that we're in. We're also uniquely tasked with the challenges of that position. And so I think I am 100% on board with work sessions, plural. And so, I'm open to that. And everything that Doug has said about the 0.3 added capacity financially, since I run the financial side of our business, all of that makes complete sense as well, simply because of the huge burden that's going to be lifted by the state money. So final 2 cents there.
One more comment. You asked how many times had Bud Creek been expanded?
Yep.
The original construction was 75,000 gallons. The county bought the property and paid a small amount for that package plant that was created there. Essentially dedicated to a fiber company, Corning.
Yep.
That is what it was for. Everybody understood that. When it was increased from 75 to 50, when it was increased from 150 to 300, all of those were paid for by the people sitting around this table, except for Doug. And so we're not just increasing 300,000 gallons, of which Doug says that he got $11 million to help do that. There's another 300,000 that is going to continue to be paid for by the people who are sitting around this table. And based on the 6.6 that Doug was talking about, taking the 660,000 and dedicating all that space just to growth Midland. That is not flipping the pump station around immediately, letting it all go to Midland, says that we are paying for half of Midland's growth. And Midland hadn't contributed anything, except for the last few years that Midland has been as active as they have. They have been committing some payment through Concord, some payment through there.
Well, the ratepayers that live in Midland and that are Midland citizens pay their utility bill. And whenever there's any development in Midland, they pay the fees that go to WSACC. So there is thousands upon thousands of people in Midland that pay monthly into WSAC. And there's developers and builders that have paid directly into WSAC. It's just the money is funneled through Concord instead of being funneled through us. So there is a lot of people over time that have helped with that. And I think there's also a case to be made that those ratepayers and those individuals that paid those fees into WSAC, have also paid for improvements of the Rocky River plant as well, because they're paying into WSAC. And so I think it's not as simple as drawing a line in the sand and dividing those groups of customers. I think what you have is individuals, they get up in the morning, they want to get their kids to school. They want to have a successful time at work. When they come home, they want to be able to cook dinner, use the bathroom, take a shower, they're paying that bill. And whoever built their home paid those fees. Whoever built the business paid the fees, and they're paying the bill as well. So I think there is a long history of businesses and families in Midland who've definitely paid into WSAC.
Yeah, I think it's, I'll just to clarify. I'm not a WSAC recipient. I have a beautiful septic system and it works great, functions great. It's a nice gravity system. I do pay Concord Water though. And I understand that. Midland was incorporated in 2000. Yes, I'm a resident of Midland. But I think we can get really tribal really quickly when we start to try to go into the, who paid for this versus who paid for that. Nobody in this room, if I'm correct, was in Midland when they decided to incorporate it in 2000. Now we were around the area, right? But looking back and saying it was built for this purpose or for Corning or it was built for that. I mean, that's growth. That's the growth that we've all seen. That's the growth that's going to come. It's going to happen. I get yelled at once a month for building houses because people don't want somebody else to be their neighbor. And I just tell them, hey, that's growth. I mean, that's the one thing we can't stop is the growth. And the one thing that I don't think really benefits the conversation is to come back and say, yeah, but you got this for free. Doug didn't go out there and try to get that for, I didn't. I was in high school in 2000 and I'm not saying that, say that I'm everybody's, we're all different ages, but, if we were to start today and look at the conversation going forward, you've got municipalities that are already paying. You've got a municipality that's willing to pay. You got a municipality that went out to give funding. I would ask, in the history of WSAC, did any other municipality go out and get state grant money to help offset some of the costs? If the answer is no, then already he's top of the podium for going out and saying, what can I do in my town to help drive down costs to my ratepayers? And I know that's probably an uncomfortable conversation, but all your other municipalities are invested in your traditional way of investment, right? Buying systems or infrastructures. And then Midland's invested in a new way. Maybe the non-conventional way of being invested in WSAC's future and growth. But everybody's invested. Different levels, maybe different types of investment. But I don't think for 1 second that there's anybody here that wants to see, a money loss type of situation or scenario that comes to WSAC. Everybody here wants the best for WSAC as a whole. That's why we're all blessed to be sitting here in this table and be tasked with these challenging decisions. And so, Chad, was one of the first things you told me when you called me earlier this year, and you said, hey, welcome to the board. I know you live in Midland, and that's great. And there's other municipalities represented, but everybody's got that hat on their knee underneath the table. And that was the verbiage you used. And so I try to sit here and have that same mindset that I sit in an at-large seat and I represent the entire service area. And so I just want to make sure that, what I say or what I put out there as far as my opinions and my thoughts and questions, they're for the benefit of WSAC as a whole. Looking at this chart right there, it's pretty clear that knowing behind the scenes, the information that's not on there, like the state grant money. Yeah, there's some stuff that needs to be improved and needs to be expanded, and maybe it's the new way of thinking going forward. You know, because now we're gonna start getting clean historical data, right? We don't have water restrictions. We don't have the Cannon plant that went out and cleaned up or released a bunch of capacity that we didn't have to expand. You know, there's value there that no town had to put money in to expand Rocky River until now, simply because a big business went out of business. So all of those factors, they all create results, and at the end of the day, it's dangerous to oversimplify all of that and to try and, you know, take it down to a simple 1 versus 1 type discussion.
And we have always been supportive of the Rocky River expansions. I mean, we've always been a team player with that. When we had no water storage capacity and we were not allowed to extend water lines, we were turning people away. We've always been a supporter of that. We were supportive of that in Raleigh when all that was going on as well. We've always been a team player in making sure that we're not held back in any way. And the people down there, they pay their sewer bills. They pay their WSACC fees. They pay their system development fees. They have ever since those fees have been in place. The 1,200 homes, they're gonna pay all those fees, the WSACC. They're gonna pay their sewer bill. It's gonna go back through the WSACC. So we absolutely have contributed. The customers have contributed.
I've heard a lot of good points, and my interpretation of it is these finance numbers that we're using to make our point, they're small and good point, Josh, good point, Mayor, good point, Doug. Those are all good points, but we're talking about them because we don't have a system that addresses equity and fairness in our decision making, because we have a one-size-fits-all system. So we're gonna chase our tails with that, because really what I hear Mayor saying here is, how is it fair that every community except for Midland will have allocation restrictions? But we're gonna invest some money, no matter how small, in creating an unfair system in that. And I feel that way. That's a good point. At the same time, it's a minuscule $6 million to upgrade this, because we've got a grant, and it looks like this is going to be needed by 2030. So you better get some planning and stuff started. If you don't, they're going to be in that same restriction. But we're all in that same restriction. So we're just going to keep going back and forth until we kind of break that log jam of, is there some other way of us making these decisions that aren't a one-size-fits-all approach? And I don't know the answer to that without digging in.
So I guess to kind of summarize some of this a little bit and figure out kind of our path forward. Is the board good with George progressing and moving forward with the 1A option to 660,000 gallons of his conceptual design that's already approved and funded, and then also to the 54 on Rocky River? Does that make sense? Now, Randy, that doesn't mean Mount Pleasant's out. That doesn't mean the Grounds is out. We were tasked when we originally started this, that we would come up with a conceptual design for an option at Rocky River and an option at Muddy Creek. When we get into this chart of how do we assemble the puzzle, that's when those stay involved. So that doesn't mean that we're dropping, this chart's getting dropped and it's only going to have 2 things on it now. That's not what that means. That just means that's what he's going to take and move forward conceptual design.
If Concord is willing to do that, I'm willing to put that in the form of a motion.
I don't even know that we need a motion for that. Because it's already.
You're the one that needs to tell us whether you want a motion or not, because you've heard some varying opinions here, and it's all your.
And just to be clear, though, I mean, these aren't decisions about what we're actually going to do. So, right. So I think those 2 options feel like, without a tremendous amount of time and effort and research to pick apart this potential 1 million or even a lower capacity at Rocky River, are going to take significant discussions and significant, consistent, good data to either back off or to accelerate. To me personally, I think that is where I am. is the 660 and the 54, knowing that there will be moments in this process we'll have to choose either of those options or others to move forward.
So we do that as a motion, William, or?
You could do it either way. I mean, it's because you're not making the ultimate decision. I mean, I think what you're doing is tasking. But yeah, to comfort for Chad, I mean, in Chad's position, I might would want a board motion, a second to vote. I mean, but I think we need to have some idea if we have consensus
We'll
on.
just title them preferred expansion alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah, 1A for Muddy Creek.
And I think it's just the motion and vote would just be to do the study to,
Complete the study.
exactly. That's it. Full
We're
stop.
not
It's
even getting
not-
engineering. There's plenty of checkpoints.
So
along the way.
the Midland, so the 660, is, if I'm hearing correct, would include
Option.
would include certain parts of the 1 million.
All right. Yes.
So that if further discussion was had about moving, redirecting some flow, the work we had done with that piece is still viable. We're just sitting something else on top of that plan.
Yep.
And then likewise, we do 54 at Rocky River. If we need to back off from that, it's essentially taking 9 away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just use
It
it.
still gives us the flexibility to have those future conversations additionally. If we were just doing the 0.66 at Muddy Creek without setting ourselves up to have some additional discussions, I think I might feel differently, but I think with that included, that I'm comfortable. I'd love to hear from.
It's just a study. I've been planning on study all of them for all. But yeah, I'm a yes.
If it's just a study, then what is George gonna be doing while we're studying?
George is gonna be completing the conceptual design, those two options. So which gets you to like that 15-20% design. And there'll be an additional updated cost estimate at the end of those.
And ultimately, we're gonna have to do that anyway.
Correct.
So I guess.
We're not wasting
there's no
time.
reason that we shouldn't move forward to
Correct.
do what you're talking about, so he can get in.
Correct.
Do that part of it, as long as we still have plenty of time and discussion for later things.
Correct. Correct. Okay. But I mean, it sounds like we have consensus.
I think you have consensus. I think it's helpful for you to have that.
The second item is the looking at capacity needs. Do we want to prepare to come back at the next board meeting to do that? Do we want to do that in 2 or 3 weeks in a work session during the day? What is the kind of the will of the board of how we look at that? I think everybody would need several weeks to really get with their jurisdictions and really, I mean, we've started that process with the work with Thomas, but I think really for everybody, high level oversight to flush those out and make sure that they feel good with them.
And Mike's not back until the 30th.
Okay.
So I would at least have a month,
Okay.
so he can participate in the
Okay.
discussions.
All right.
I'm in June. Is that okay with?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think. We're not going to 54 MGD anytime soon, so it's really at 45 to 54. I think we got several months to figure out. As long as we keep George and those guys working on this 2 million and the conceptual design and a lot of the intricacies, they've got several months.
Okay. Well, we'll have some discussion and I'll look at some dates and we'll see if we want to do that as a work session, maybe a week before the board meeting. So then we can then come into the board meeting with some good information and some good data. The last item I will kind of kick towards William, the discussion's been, when we looked at phase 3 and phase 4 and the local agreements that we did, we split up capacity based off of historical average flows. That's the way the board chose to do that. That is not a precedence that has to be maintained into future expansions. To your point, that if we're expanding 10 million gallons at the plant and Harrisburg's portion is going to be 11 million, but they want to have 25% of it instead of 11%, and they want to pay for that 25%, then I think that option's there. That's a board level decision of how that equity is handled and how that's taken, because Concord may be like, we don't want 58%. We're fine at 45%. am I correct in that? And
You're correct. So the current interlocal agreement just goes to the 30. It allocates the 30. We will already need to do an amendment to go to the 34. And then there will need to be a subsequent amendment to that, but we're not tied to the 5-year look back. That was just what we did at the time for the 26.5 and the 30.
so I think that's where we can take the data that we flush out through a work session of what are people's real dreams, desires, needs, goals for the next 10 years or whatever it is, that then those numbers could be utilized by the board to figure out how does the equity look of some of the decisions that are made. And is that what you've been kind of?
Absolutely. I think it makes it easier for somebody to say yes and or no if you're not hurting a partner at the table either way. Right? So if there's trade-offs to be made, you're not holding somebody back or you're not stepping on somebody, just more flexibility, the better. We never went down that road though, so I don't know what the trap doors are, so I'd like to discuss it.
Correct.
And understand what we're getting ourselves into.
But I think that is pretty straightforward. There's nothing binding in place that would limit that the 5-year historical average flows have to be what's utilized. There's nothing there that binds us to that as we move forward to future decisions.
And I'd like to ask Doug, since Doug says he doesn't get all the information he would like to have, I don't get all the information I'd like to have. I'd love for Doug to make a presentation to this board to give us an idea what the town of Midland is planning for its utility system. I know there've been negotiations back and forth between you and Concord. I don't want to get into those negotiations, but I'd like to know when and if you're planning to become a utility and what is going to take for you to become a utility that is similar to all the rest of us who are a utility, because you are different at this point in time.
So
And as a result of that, I'd like to know when you're going to look like the rest of us.
So Concord and Midland partnered on a study about that with Raftellus to determine what the impact would be of separating off the system. And it was too small at this time to separate off the system without causing issues. So
But I assume if all this fast growth that you have just predicted tonight was to occur, that
Yes.
means you got a lot more pipe in the ground, you got a lot more customer base, you got a lot more things that you're going to have to do. I'd love to hear about that because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Raftellus has a certain number of utility accounts that need to be achieved before that starts to make sense. And as soon as we get to that point, we're gonna have Raftellus update that study and we're gonna take another look at that. And then we're gonna re-enter those discussions, which not just involves Concord, but would involve the local government commission as well, because they were involved on the front end. But it's too early. Right now, it would not be good for customers. It's just not time yet. But we're gonna get there and we'll have those discussions and we'll wrap the local government commission into it, who will have ultimate approval authority on that. So, yeah, but I'm more than happy to talk with you about that more, but it's pretty simple where we're at with that.
So
That's
we're
really
expecting
the
to expend capacity to you up to 660,000 gallons, but have no clue as to what you're going to be in some point down the road.
I don't follow you there.
I mean, if all 660,000 gallons is going to be yours, I'm asking,
Well, it'd be 360,000 gallons, but it's also not just for.
it's all 600. You're getting 300 now and you're going to get 300 more. So 60 more. So you're going to have 660,000 gallons. And unless something is redirected to you or to Muddy Creek, I should say, then you're going to have 660,000 gallons of capacity that you could begin to utilize immediately and make commitments to people to utilize that immediately without us having any idea what your growth plans are and what you're expected to be down the road.
Well, by the time that expansion gets turned on, the 300,000 will be flowing, it'll be taken up. And it's not just people inside the town limits, it's people outside the town limits like Corning, where we get no taxes from. So there would be an expansion of 360,000 gallons. I don't think that's a whole lot to ask. I imagine it would not take you very long to allocate 360,000 gallons. You know, that would probably be a couple meetings for you. I don't think that's a whole lot of growth for Midland or the southern part of the county. I mean, that is a huge part of the county. So I don't think in terms of scale that is a big bucket of allocation. I mean, I think that gives us some room to make some decisions and to let the elected leaders in our community make the decisions and to let the county commissioners make some decisions about economic development projects that may go down there and flow to the plant. But, you know.
But I mean, I'm sorry, pardon me for interrupting you, but I keep hearing rumors about a school and about how that's going to affect all the needs and all those kinds of things. It sounds like there's some things out there that you do know about, and how is all that going to get connected? Who is going to be building all that? Is it you? Is it the county going to build the school? Is there something that that there's a subdivision right across the street that you're going to pick up flow from that area where the school is located? Won't you help us understand what's going to be in the future for Midland?
Well, we did try to get that school moving, but they said it would probably be another 5 to 10 years. Before the
5 to
school
10
would
years.
be justified before the high school.
Well, it's the very first time out of your mouth that I've heard that. Every time else, I've heard people talk about the school. Even Josh mentioned tonight the school.
Yes, we have asked that the school be accelerated. We do believe there's a need for a high school in the southern part of the county. But the school system has some capital needs that they would prefer to do first.
Doug, would you be interested in doing a short presentation for the board? Mount Pleasant did this. It's been a good bit.
6-8 months ago.
Yeah, kind of a similar thing, just to show where things were happening, where you think that may just go a long way to sort of leveling the playing field, so we can all understand what you think's gonna happen. I think that would be helpful, especially as we dive deeper into these things. I think we're gonna need to all at least have a basic understanding of what those are, so. Did you get
Next
every,
question.
Any more?
No more, I hope.
you got everything you needed? Okay. Any other comments? Boy, Thomas's name was on that agenda item and he kind of got out pretty soon.
Settle in.
He
You
did.
want to stand up? You want to hit things?
Because I couldn't spell an Ipsitaka, so it's gonna be.
It's correct. All right, Chad, you still got the floor.
I got 3 words. The lake is full. It's my only executive director update. I tried not to put on, but when we were down 5.5 feet in January, I was not very comfortable, happy, or didn't feel good about that. And this last rain, we got filled it up. So we're full out at the reservoir, and that's a good thing for me.
Pleased with the work, everything?
Yes.
Good.
Chad, quick question on water. Not, but IBT, this might be just as well to Jeff and Concord. That was a unanimous approval in the House to move it forward. I'm sorry, in the Senate to move IBT moratorium forward. Is that gonna impact us significantly? Are we looking at that? Should we look at it? I was surprised by unanimous approval of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of Charlotte's stakeholder committee on their IVT, so it's been history. You know, we did this, how long ago? Did we do this?
10.
Yeah, 10, 12 years now. And it's the same thing again. Like, I mean, just like going back in time, it's, and I do, you know, some of the same narratives of, you know, we really need to stop and create a plan, and North Carolina needs to work with South Carolina. Everybody needs to come together, and which is always the feel good topic, when somebody's half through an IBT process, right? To start talking about that. But I say that to say, you know, I think we had 3 IBT bills, at least 3 that were on the same. One looked to be specifically going after Charlotte's request. One that was the subbasin rule that would have eliminated the Rocky River as a subbasin altogether, which would have removed the IBT requirement altogether. And then now there's this other one that sort of seems to be creating that pause that everybody keeps asking about. Now, what happens during a pause? You know, imagine getting the state together and all these basins trying to answer water rights. I mean, we're still arguing over that.
That's the one I guess I see, which is the 5-year moratorium, as a pause to let us study it, that got unanimous approval move
Yeah.
forward. I was like, wow, that's like,
Do we even know what that does to the other 5 billion that Concord and Kannapolis have been granted? Do we
Well,
even-
I believe that we're okay. If you have an issued certificate, I think you're okay. But, you know, again, as we start talking about 54, you know, we are using, we're pumping 5 million every single day from the Yadkin finished water, using it. We're sending 800 to you guys, as part of yours. We haven't gone to Charlotte yet. That's the other 10, but really that's 15 plus whatever, and we can squeeze out of our own impoundments, which isn't a lot. So the water numbers get there really fast as well. Which is why I caution when we go too big, we need to have that holistic discussion of, gotta have the potable, resource too, to be able to provide the sewer. So, yeah, I think there's this idea that slowing down will give an opportunity to come up with this grand, everybody holds hands and works together, and it's just never happened.
yeah, all we need is a little bit more time.
It's never
to figure
happened.
it out. Past 100 years hasn't worked, so we're gonna.
All right, we will go to public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to address the board. And hearing none, we'll move forward. We do have a brief closed session, so we will entertain a motion to go into closed session. Authority of GS 143, 318, 11A1.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion a second. All those in favor, aye.
Uh,
Any opposed? We stand in closed session.